Chapter 1. An Introduction. Remove the hood. Tsukachi ordered. Izuku obliged him by taking off the hood and shaking out his bright green curls with a smile. He also took off his cloth face mask and tucked it away in his pocket to reveal freckles and his lower face. Tsukachi narrowed his eyes, sighing, and placed a red blinking recording device on the metal table and then laced his fingers together. Please state your name and age for confirmation in the presence of my quirk, Truth, he said firmly. Midoriya Izuku, age 14. Izuku said without complaint. Izuku grinned at Eraserhead, giving him a fluttering wave before he crossed his arms. Midoriya, do you know how serious this is? Tsukachi asked. Seriously. Absolutely, detective. I believe this is, not very serious at all. Izuku grinned. It was more baring his teeth than a real smile. Tsukachi sighed again. Congrats on capturing me, by the way. It's cute that you worked so hard for this. Midoriya, can you tell us about how you became a villain? Tsukachi said, ignoring Izuku's teasing as he assessed him. You started as a vigilante when you were 9 years old, correct? I guess you could say that. I got bored one day and decided to see what it was like. Izuku shrugged. It was fun, kicking the shit out of people and leaving them on your doorstep. Tsukachi nodded, writing something on his clipboard. You started killing other villains soon after you turned 11, dropping their bodies off at the station instead, correct? No. Izuku grinned, while Tsukachi frowned. All right. When did you start killing? Well, I had my first kill when I was 5, but it was mostly accidental. Can you elaborate? My good detective, I'd love to. Izuku laughed. See, my dad decided I was old enough to start using my quirk. Unfortunately, my first test subject had a mutation quirk, and he didn't survive. Poor thing. His wings were torn off him in such an unpleasant way. Izuku clicked his tongue and grinned wickedly. Unpleasant, but beautiful. Tsukachi was frowning, flipping through the thin folder of information they had on the villain. Drop off. Izuku never liked the name, but it was accurate enough. He did drop off villains at the stations, after all, dead or alive. We haven't had any reports of your quirk doing anything like that. Tsukachi frowned. We haven't had any reports of your quirk at all. Well, that's because I kill the ones I use my quirk on. Can't have them spilling my secrets before I'm ready now, can I? Tsukachi frowned harder at Izuku's flippant tone. Can you state your quirk for the record, in the presence of my quirk, Truth? I can. Quirk, Steel, at your service, detective. Izuku gave a little bow, grinning wickedly as Tsukachi went dead pale. Ah, cute. You've guessed who my father is, then? Tsukachi. Eraserhead turned to his partner, looking at him with narrowed eyes when Tsukachi said nothing in response. We're sending him to Tartarus. Tsukachi said immediately, which made Eraserhead blanch. What, why? He's a child. His father is the most feared villain ever, Eraser. Tsukachi stressed, dark eyes glued to Izuku's wicked smile. He's the son of the boogeyman of the underground. Seriously? Come on, Tsukachi, that's irrational. There hasn't been any proof he even exists. He's a legend. I've seen him, Tsukachi said as he turned to Eraserhead, taking his eyes off Izuku for the first time. All Might went against him 5 years ago and defeated him. He's known as All for One. Oh yeah, Dad was mad about that, by the way. Izuku said, rolling his eyes. Mama smacked him for it when he got home. Only idiots get caught by accident. He's still alive? Tsukachi choked, making Izuku laugh. Duh, you think All Might actually killed him? Sorry to break it to you, but Dad's fine. Injured, yes. Inconvenienced, yes. But all you really did was ensure that my brother will replace Dad in a few years. Izuku sighed dramatically. Dad's gonna retire, which will be so boring. There's more of you? Tsukachi jumped to his feet and slammed his hand on the table, making Izuku blink and Eraserhead sigh. Tell me everything. Now. No, Izuku said, bringing a hand up to examine his fingernails. You're throwing me in Tartarus, which, again, would be so boring, and I am allergic to boredom. How can I collect and kill if I'm in Tartarus? A waste of my talents is what it is. Tsukachi, you need to be rational. Drop-Off clearly has no interest in running the underworld. Eraserhead said, staring at the detective blankly. If what you say is true, he'd have done it by now if he was. Sit down. Good point. Izuku pointed at Eraser with his handcuffed hands. How did we even arrest you? Tsukachi narrowed his eyes at Izuku. The reports say an officer just tackled and handcuffed you. How many quirks do you have? A little under 100. Izuku shrugged. I'd have more, but Dad says I need to be selective because clutter gets annoying after a while. I haven't noticed, but that's what he said. Why didn't you leave? Tsukachi demanded. You could have just, I don't know, not been arrested. Tsukachi, he's wearing quirk suppressants. Aizawa sighed. I thought this would be interesting. Izuku shrugged, answering Tsukachi's question. You've been trying to catch me since I was 9 years old. I figured I'd give you a chance to have your fun. Tsukachi, if you don't sit down and do this interrogation properly, I'm taking you off the case. Eraserhead snapped. Tsukachi stilled, staring the hero down, then sat back down stiffly. Fine. He cleared his throat and picked up the file again. So your quirk is called Steel? Can you elaborate? My quirk allows me to take the quirks of others and use them for myself. Izuku rolled his eyes. It's pretty self-explanatory. Can you give back the quirks you've taken? Tsukachi asked shakily. No. Izuku pouted, crossing his arms. It's stupid. Dad says it's my only shortcoming, but Mama doesn't care. Tsukachi nodded slowly, but moved on. And how does it activate? I can pull them towards me whenever I want. Izuku said, brightening happily, which made Tsukachi stiffen. Currently, I can pull any quirk towards me that's within a mile radius of my position. In addition, I know any and all quirks in that radius and can understand their uses perfectly, if I want to. Much better than Dad's quirk, in my opinion. So you can feel everyone in the building? Tsukachi asked calmly, even as his face drained of color. Yep. It's interesting. Did you know one of your employees has a quirk that allows him to walk on water? Izuku asked brightly. Such a useful quirk. Seems useless, but if he were paired with the girl who can create water from nothing, they could be a perfect duo. Imagine the girl creates a waterfall staircase. The boy can just go up it. Izuku sighed. You people have no creativity. Can't believe you stuck him in a lab and made the girl an assistant. Midoriya. Tsukachi didn't get to finish because Izuku's phone rang. I'm sorry, it's Mama. I'll put her on speakerphone. Izuku dug around in his pocket to reveal his phone, awkwardly tapped the green button with his wrist at an odd angle because of the handcuffs, then clicked the speaker icon. Hey Mama, you're on speakerphone. Say hi to Eraserhead and the detective. Hello Tsukachi, Aizawa, she said, clearly amused. Izuku could just imagine her eyebrows going up as they did when she was pleasantly surprised. Izuku, I said you could spend 2 days at the station, not 5. Your brother nearly destroyed the house when I said he couldn't kill the police officers to get you back. Sorry, Mama. Izuku smiled, ignoring the pale detective and sighing hero. I'll be home soon. Promise. You'd better. Don't think I'll let you keep going out if you pull this again. I gave you a curfew and you weren't back by then. Her voice was stern and it made Izuku wince. Sorry, Mama. He said again. She huffed into the phone, perfectly portraying her disappointment. He sighed. I'll be home before Dad notices. Okay. Well, hurry up. He gets back tomorrow. Yes, Mama. Love you. Love you too, baby. Go easy on Tsukachi. You know his quirk gives him migraines. She hung up then, and Izuku sighed. He tucked his phone away and smiled at the duo across the table. I'd better go. Mama was very clear. You think we'd release you just like that? Eraserhead raised an eyebrow, but then his eyes went completely colorless and blankly white. What the? He immediately stood with a shout, shoving back his chair and stumbling backwards with a hand over his eyes. Your quirk doesn't work if you're blind, Eraserhead. I'll be going now, Izuku said, activating a quirk called Whiteout. He then stood and easily unclasped the handcuffs. You should have double-checked, Detective. I don't approve of quirk suppressants. Tsukachi stood, panicked, jumping forward to grab at Izuku. Unfortunately, he was a split second too late, as Izuku blinked himself away. Izuku hated blinking, but it was his only teleportation quirk. He landed roughly on his kitchen floor, groaning as his back slammed into one of the cabinets. Quirk. Blink was useful. It allowed the user to teleport at will through blinking, but it made Izuku's insides feel all twisted and yucky like he was shoved through a rubber tube. Mama, Mura, I'm home, Izuku yelled into the house, climbing to his feet and dusting himself off. He briefly acted purge, which would boil any contaminants from his body. It was to make sure the tracker they'd slipped in his food was burned away and destroyed. Honestly, did they think he wouldn't notice? Zoo. Tamura came crashing into the kitchen, slamming into Izuku as he grabbed him into a tight hug. Why did you get yourself arrested? That was stupid. Now they know your stats, idiot. I know, Mura, but I wanted them to. Izuku laughed, gently pulling away and grinning at his brother's glare. They were getting bored, and I heard Tsukachi say he was considering handing my case off because he was tired of me. Can you believe it? Yes. Tamura deadpanned, earning a punch in the arm. They both laughed. Sensei's coming home tomorrow. Tamura, we've talked about this. Their mother appeared with a soft smile. He's not a teacher. He's your dad. He's nothing like that horrible man you called a father, though, remember? Yes, mother. Tamura said softly, making Izuku smile. Inko gently caressed his face and then kissed his forehead. Anyway, Dad is coming home. I know. That's why I came back. Also, Mama, you're terrifying. Izuku gave her a look which made her grin at him. She may seem soft with her rounded body and innocent teary eyes, but it was a facade. She was terrifying. Hisashi will probably ask about what you've been up to, so be prepared. Okay. She raised an eyebrow. He nodded quickly. Yep. I never went to the police station. Izuku then paused with a frown. Wait, I need to go out again. Tamura groaned. What now? Zu, I wanted to show you my new gaming setup. Mother bought me those pre-quirk lights I wanted. The ones that are little and all straight in a line? Izuku asked, tilting his head. Those are the ones that come with the little remotes, making them change color. He remembered. Yes, yes, Tamura exclaimed, eyes slightly crazed with excitement. What sort of side quest do you need to go on anyway? You'll just have to wait and see. Izuku said mysteriously. Omura, if I gave you a quest of your own, up for it. Depends. Tamura crossed his arms. What is it? It's a hacking job. Izuku grinned when Tamura cackled in delight. All right, let's hear it. Tamura prompted. I want you to scrub all of the footage from every police station from the entire week. All of it. Audio, interviews, data, everything you can get your extremely dangerous hands on. Izuku laughed at the absolutely delighted look on his brother's face. All of it. You're not making me keep some. Tamura's eyes were ecstatic as he grinned almost maniacally. Nope. Have at it. Destroy whatever you want and feel free to add whatever villainous viruses and bugs you want. Perfect. You never let me have at it like this. Tamura exclaimed, running upstairs. I'll be back. Mother, I'll be in my room doing very villainous things. Inko laughed after her oldest, turning back to her youngest with a fond smile. You didn't have to do that, she asked, making Izuku shrug with a smile. I like making him happy. You know how Dad makes him do those precision jobs where subtly matters. Giving him free rein to destroy always makes his day. His mother ruffled his curls softly. Oh, Izuku, I missed you. She pulled him into a hug. Welcome home. He sighed, burying his freckle-covered face in her shoulder. I missed you too. It's good to be home. Izuku pulled away with a sigh. I'm headed back to the police station. Tsukachi recorded the interview, so I need that recording device. Okay, baby. Be home for dinner, all right? I will. Izuku smiled at her and then activated Blink. Izuku slammed into the hard floor of a familiar interrogation room with a groan, standing up and waving at the camera for Tamura. He then activated Chameleon and slipped out of the room. Chameleon was a complex quirk that made his cells and small things in contact with his skin completely translucent, allowing people to see right through him without even knowing it. Izuku took note of where everyone was using steel, found Tsukachi in his office, then headed down the corridor on silent feet. He went slowly, ensuring nobody heard or could otherwise notice him, grinning as someone looked right through him. Tsukachi was still in his office when Izuku got there, so he gently opened the door with a maniacal grin. Who's there? Tsukachi asked. When the door was fully open but there was no one for Tsukachi to see, he shot to his feet and drew his gun. I'm warning you. Reveal yourself. Izuku did not do this. He instead used psychokinesis to open the window a few inches before slamming it shut with a clatter. Tsukachi spun around and immediately turned his full attention to the window as Izuku spotted the recording device on the desk. Izuku snatched it up and hid it in his pocket, the device vanishing, then went completely still. Tsukachi turned back around and immediately noticed the missing recording device. He fumbled for his phone, eyes darting suspiciously around the room as he dialed a number and pressed call. "Aizawa, we have a problem," Tsukachi said before the other person on the line could say anything. "Do I need to come back? I just left the station. The recording device is gone. I don't know what good your presence would do, but it's definitely a problem." "You lost it." "I think someone with an invisibility-type quirk came into my office. That's the only way I can explain the door opening by itself and then the window slamming shut. I never saw anyone, and I was standing right there." Tsukachi ran a hand through his hair roughly. "I hadn't even downloaded the interrogation yet. We have no proof it happened at all." "What about the camera footage?" "Interrogation rooms have audio," Eraserhead said calmly. "Think rationally, Tsukachi. You're panicking." Okay. I'm sorry," Tsukachi muttered, taking a deep breath. "It's just, the commission needs to know about this. You know how they are. They won't take anything seriously unless proof is shoved down their throats." "Call me back when you've figured it out." Eraserhead promptly hung up on the detective, and Izuku grinned. If the only proof Midoriya Izuku, son of AFO, existed in the footage and the device in his pocket, then Izuku was golden. He got what he wanted. He had Tsukachi's attention, scared the hell out of him, and nobody had any proof he'd done so. The best part was that nobody else had seen his face. Nobody besides Tsukachi and Eraserhead. Izuku knew this because no one had been watching the interrogation behind the double-sided mirror, and Izuku hadn't shown his face, hair, or even his eyes to anyone during the days in his cell. It was flawlessly executed, just as he had planned. Izuku stayed only a minute more, watching Tsukachi sit back down at his desk and try to pull up the footage that Tamura was destroying. Izuku was immensely pleased at the panic on Tsukachi's face. No, Tsukachi exclaimed, smashing buttons on his computer in frustration. "Damn it," Izuku laughed, making Tsukachi stiffen and snap his eyes to Izuku, but it made no difference. Using Blink and deactivating Chameleon, Izuku was home the next second while immediately landing on his ass in Tamura's bedroom with a defeated groan. "It's hilarious watching you use that quirk, Zu." Izuku looked up at his brother's grin with a glare. "Before you ask, I've ruined all police stations in a 100-mile radius." "Excellent." Izuku laughed as he stood, brushing himself off. "Did you see me wave?" "I waved at you." "I did." Tamura cackled. "Very nice. You landed on your ass then too." "Well, come off it." Izuku shoved his brother and made him cackle. "Can I have the recording device?" Tamura asked, fingers twitching and eyes bright. "Sure, here you go." Izuku handed it over easily. Tamura pressed all 5 fingers to the little device and cackled as it dissolved into dust. "You've been practicing." "Mother's been bugging me." Tamura groaned. "You're 20. Tamura, you need perfect control of your quirk." Tamura, "No, you can't just play games all day, Tamura." He playfully made his voice high-pitched and bossy. Izuku burst out laughing. "She's amazing like that." Izuku giggled, making his brother sigh. "I think it's great you're still practicing." "Hey, I stopped disintegrating things randomly when I was 12. Tamura defended, crossing his arms. "Sometimes I mess up, yes, but so does everyone." "I know, Tamura," Izuku said, smiling. "That's why you don't even wear gloves anymore. It's proof of how cool you are." Izuku pulled Tamura into a hug, his brother melting slightly at the affection. "Really? Remember when I tried getting a hang of that crumble quirk?" Tamura pulled away with a laugh. "You wanted a quirk like mine because you said it was powerful and you couldn't steal it." Tamura grinned. "You destroyed literally everything for a week before Mother gave you that ultimatum. Did you know it still stands?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. "If I use that quirk even a little bit, I'm grounded and have to wear gloves for the rest of the week, even if I turn it off." "Serves you right." Tamura flicked Izuku's forehead. "Not everyone can be as cool as me." "Too true," Too true, Izuku said, nodding seriously. Tamura shoved him, and Izuku laughed. Izuku. Both of them froze, then slowly turned to the door where their dad was lingering in the doorway. You've been busy these last few days. Hey dad. Izuku waved nervously. You're back early. You're dead, Tamura whispered, earning a smack from Izuku that made him choke on a laugh. Come along, Izuku. Their dad called, holding out an arm. Hirojiri will be escorting us to my office. Oh man, Izuku groaned. Tamura patted his shoulder, and Izuku walked forward with resignation. He took his dad's offered hand, his hand being swallowed by his father's huge one, as one of Hirojiri's portals appeared before them. His dad pulled him through without delay. Now, Izuku, you know you'll need to be punished for this, Hisashi said, sitting down behind his desk heavily. Izuku could feel the disappointed stare, even through his dad's mask. I know, Izuku said, toeing the carpet with one of his feet. I was bored. You can't keep misbehaving just because you're bored, little one, Hisashi chided, making Izuku cross his arms. Your punishment will be a little more severe than just being grounded. Okay, what is it? Izuku sighed. He just hoped his dad didn't make him go another month quirkless. That was the worst. He had a quirk suppressant around his ankle the whole time. He'd gotten so bored. Yeah, most of his mental quirks still worked despite the suppressants, but it still sucked. You'll be taking the UA Heroics entrance exam and spending a year as a heroic student. His voice held sharp finality. Izuku gaped at him in disbelief for a solid second after. No, he exclaimed, eyes widening with horror. No, you can't. Izuku, you got yourself arrested. Hisashi scolded with heavy disappointment. Purposefully, I might add. You revealed your face and name, which put all of us at risk. A year in high school isn't the end of the world. In addition, you're only allowed to use 2 quirks the entire time you're at school. Dad, please, I won't do it again. Izuku cried desperately. Don't make me go to UA. I can't do school, I can't. There's people there, Dad. They'll talk to me and want to be my friend. Let this be a reminder, Izuku, his dad said, standing. This will be your longest punishment yet, but if you promise to be on your best behavior, then I'll consider pulling you after just a few months. Dad, please don't. Izuku tried again, clasping his hands together desperately. I might not even pass. Izuku, his father's voice was sharp, my punishment is final. You will pass, and you will go to UA. You've always hated the idea of being a hero, and now you'll have to act like one. It won't kill you, so let it be a lesson. Izuku wilted, dropping his head and nodding. Yes, Dad. His voice shook with both anger and tears. Hisashi stood and came over to hug him gently. Izuku pressed his face into his father's chest. When Izuku was dropped back off in Tamura's room, he immediately fell face first on his brother's bed and started screaming into a pillow. Tamura spun in his desk chair and raised an eyebrow. What did Dad say? I'm gonna be a hero student at UA. Izuku cried, sitting up to whine at Tamura. Maybe as long as a whole year. Ouch! Tamura winced. He assessed Izuku's teary eyes and his shaking fists, then nodded. Want to go to Takoba and destroy the trash? 3 days' worth of dishes duty says I destroy more than you. Izuku gasped and jumped to his feet. I'll get my gloves. I'm gonna use Crumble, you're on. Tamura cackled as Izuku sprinted from the room. Hirojiri, we're going to destroy a beach. What? Chapter 2. Entrance Exams. Izuku frowned at his brother as he crossed yet another quirk off the list. Why can't I use Heave? Izuku asked, leaning over the list. Strength quirks are useful. You think all quirks are useful? Tamura grumbled, eyeing the very few that he hadn't crossed out yet. Since Dad says you have to pass, which means you need something stereotypically heroic and powerful. Tamura scowled. Dad told you that you'd be taking the entrance exam 2 whole weeks ago. You should have picked sooner, but you're stuck on that one stupid. I'm not budging on a tract. Izuku huffed, crossing his arms. I picked it 2 weeks ago, and I'm not changing my mind. Why? Psychokinesis is so much better. His brother threw his hands up. Attract only brings things towards you, specifically your hands, and that's it. Psychokinesis allows you to move things around however you want with your mind. Well, attract is like mamas. Izuku admitted, flushing as he looked away. Tamura stared at him for a moment, sighed, then reluctantly circled a tract. Fine. So what else? Also, have you come up with an explanation for how you have two quirks? Tamura turned to raise an eyebrow. Dad says you can pick two. That depends on what we pick. Izuku hummed. They'll have to be able to pass as one chew. Izuku, you have 10 minutes before you need to leave. Inko came bustling in with a disapproving expression. What's this? She asked, leaning forward to examine the paper. Zu still hasn't picked which quirks he wants to use. Tamura made a face. So we wrote down all the quirks he has and we're sorting through them because he needs to get his ass in gear. He picked a tract for one of them. Ah, Izuku. Inko ruffled Izuku's hair with a soft smile. He glared at the wall with his face still red. I think push would be a perfect secondary quirk. It's centered in the hands too. You could call your quirk push and pull. Say it's based on mine. Genetics are so random it would make sense that the quirk could mutate to be more powerful. I like it. Izuku beamed, then started tapping his brother's shoulder repeatedly. Mura, I want that one. Ugh, fine. Tamura circled push with a sigh. You'll be a little weakling of a hero, Zu, but fine. Don't forget the new address on your way back. It's not new, Tamura. It was Mama's apartment that Dad kept even after she moved here to be with him. Izuku corrected. Yeah, well, I say it's new. Tamura huffed. I've never been there. I already told you, Tamura, you don't have to live there if you don't want to. Inko said, smiling at him. I know you like it here, and don't really like Hisashi's Hue quirk. I want to, Tamura said immediately. I want to. Staying here without you and Zu would be awful. He looked down at his lap, so Inko bent down to hug him gently. I know. You're sure you're okay with it? Hue isn't that bad. It just feels like being dunked in ice water briefly. Tamura sighed, and Izuku laughed. What colors are you going to pick? Izuku asked. Hue only changes hair and eye color. I'll keep my red eyes, but my hair's gonna match yours. Tamura said, turning to grin at Izuku. Except mine won't look like a piece of broccoli. Hey, Izuku said, reaching up to touch his messy curls with a pout. That's so mean. Mama, Mura is bullying me. She laughed, patting his cheek fondly. Come on, Izuku, you need to go? Kurogiri will take you to the apartment, and you'll take the train from there. Okay. Izuku nodded in acknowledgement. Tamura and I will be moving into the apartment while you're gone. Everything should be set up by the time you get home, so don't worry too much. Sukachi should visit in the next few days. Eraserhead will see me testing and inevitably know when I pass, so make sure everything really is set up. Izuku reminded her as he grabbed his backpack. Bye, Mura. Go lie your murderous little ass off, Zu. Tamura grinned. Izuku laughed and kissed his mother's cheek as he stepped into the portal that had appeared in the doorway. He stepped out into a very empty apartment. There was no furniture, but also no dust. It was clean and polished, as if the occupants had only just moved out to make room for them. The floors were nice, clean and pretty, though bland. Izuku smiled. It wasn't home, but it would work. Shouldering his backpack, Izuku opened the front door, then locked it behind him with the key he'd been given for his perfectly normal home that most definitely wasn't full of villains. Nope. Duh. Izuku sighed as he took the train to UA, already resigned to his inevitable success. The UA entrance exam was a test against robots, but they handed out heroic points like candy. All Izuku had to do was destroy some robots and save a few kids, and bam, he's hero material. Upon his arrival at UA, Izuku rather immediately fell out of place. The story was that the Midoriyas were a well-off, middle-income family, and Inko homeschooled both her children because she wanted to keep her sons close after her boyfriend abandoned her. Because of this, Izuku had no middle school uniform, so he stuck out like a sore thumb. Part of him knew nobody cared or were staring, but his anxiety said they were judging him. What? They didn't like his sweatpants and t-shirt combo. People were grouped by school, and since Izuku didn't have a school, he was plopped right near the front with the Nabu City Middle School. Izuku was curious, so he activated Steel and let it spread out to feel for quirks. It was immediately assaulting him with the knowledge of quirk after quirk after quirk, and it made Izuku's head spin with need. One in particular, 2 seats down, had a hypnosis quirk that could put people in submissive and mindless states that make them susceptible to the commands of the user. It sounded amazing, and he wanted it. To distract himself, Izuku began to doodle on a piece of paper. However, he quickly became bored and decided to try and turn it into a paper airplane. The folds were sloppy, and it was a little bit of a mess, but it sort of looked like an airplane. Mike was talking, but Izuku didn't care. Would his airplane even fly? Probably not. He wasn't outside where there was wind. He was also in the front row. Where would he even throw it to? If he threw it up at the students in the back and used push, maybe it would work? He could try. Izuku stuck out his tongue in concentration and then threw it as hard as he could, pushing it up and into the air. He gasped in delight as it flew, seeing it float upwards, but then a boy stood up at exactly the wrong time. The airplane smacked right into the boy's face and bounced off his glasses. Izuku burst out laughing in the following silence. "Did you throw that?" The boy glared while Izuku laughed. "This is a serious orientation. You are disrespecting UA by doing such childish." "Yes, it's mine." Izuku interrupted, wheezing. "Here, throw it back." The boy glared, pushing up his glasses. "No, you threw it at me, and it's only fair you don't get it back." Izuku frowned. "That's rude," Izuku said, offended. He then made a grabbing motion, and the plane floated out of the boy's hand and back into his palm. Izuku pouted in his seat, crossing his arms as Mike called everyone's attention back. Izuku brought out another sheet of paper and started again, making another airplane. The second one came out better, less sloppy, and the lines more crisp. He beamed at it when he was done. He was considering throwing it when the lights flicked on, and Izuku looked up in surprise. It seemed Mike was done blabbering about nothing, which was good. Izuku popped out of his seat and immediately threw his airplane happily. Unfortunately, it ended up smacking into someone again. Why can't people just get out of his way? His little plane just wanted to be free. "Damn it," Izuku complained, scooping it up. "Oh man, the wing is damaged." "Don't you care about the exam at all?" Izuku looked up at the annoyed voice and came face to face with the hypnosis user's purple eyes. "Why would I? It's not like it's going to be hard." Izuku frowned. "Oh, you're one of those." The boy scowled. "You think you'll skate by so easily you don't even need to pay attention, right?" "I mean, yeah." Izuku shrugged. "Anyone could. Though, they forgot to add the secondary scoring to the pamphlet. Did Mike mention it?" "Excuse me." The boy looked tiredly annoyed. Izuku blinked. "The heroic points. Did he mention the heroic points?" Izuku repeated slowly. "Seriously, it's like you weren't listening." "What are heroic points?" The boy's face was screwed up in confusion. Izuku sighed. "They give out points to people who seem heroic." "Super easy." Izuku shrugged. "I think they're called rescue points. They're testing people to see if they'll prioritize destroying robots instead of protecting their fellow examinees." "You're serious?" Izuku zoned in on the boy's face. He recognized that tone. It was a bland tone that tried to hide desperation. Izuku could see heavy scrutiny in the boy's gaze. "There's another way, besides the robots." "Obviously. How'd you think people with non-physical quirks get in?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Look, this talk was great, but I don't do friends. Good luck, or whatever. I'm sure whatever heroic dreams you have will come true and all that." CYA. Izuku brushed past the boy without another word and threw his paper airplane again. Using push and pull, that was absolutely what his quirk was, nothing suspicious here. He made it swish through the air away from him and back without issues. He made sure to aim above people's heads to avoid more crashes. The wing was already bent, and that was just annoying. Izuku sighed as he arrived at the testing grounds. So he threw his paper airplane one more time and pushed it all the way up and over the wall and into the city. He smiled as it disappeared. When a hand came down on his shoulder, Izuku reflexively reached back and grabbed the muscular arm of the person and promptly threw them to the ground at his feet. The boy in blue went up and over Izuku's shoulder and slammed back first into the ground. Izuku dusted off his hands and bent down to glare at the boy who had the wind knocked completely out of him. "What the fuck did you touch me for?" Izuku exclaimed angrily. "It's extremely rude to touch people without permission, idiot." The boy on the ground gasped for breath as Izuku took a step back, and he slowly climbed to his feet shakily. The people around them were staring, But Izuku didn't care as he crossed his arms and waited for the boy to speak. You shouldn't attack people for touching you. The boy scolded, winded slightly. I only meant to ask if you're taking this exam seriously. You can do that without touching me. Izuku scolded. Seriously, EW, don't you know about consent? Some of the people around him snickered as Izuku put his hands on his hips. Besides, who cares if I'm taking the exam seriously? Isn't that better for you? If I fail, you're more likely to succeed. Lay off, asshole. Izuku then marched away and crossed his arms as he glared at the doors. He already wanted to leave. Start. Izuku glanced up at Present Mike before jogging into the arena. Other people were running, but Izuku just calmly jogged. Robots burst out in front of people, and Izuku reached out a hand with a grin. Using pull, he ripped the control panel right out of its chest and threw it into the street with a little of push. Following the group, Izuku randomly yanked the cores out of robots that he could, but he also occasionally pulled people out of the way of lasers when he could. They always cried out in surprise, but Izuku didn't care. Safety first, and all that heroic shit. Izuku was horribly bored by the time the ground started to shake. He briefly considered it to be an earthquake, but his mind was abruptly changed when he saw a massive robot climbing out of the ground from between two buildings. Izuku laughed upon seeing the terrified expressions on the examinees and grinned at the robot. It would be fun to take down. If only he could use separate. It allowed the user to turn anyone inside out with a single thought. He'd never used it, but was sort of dying to find an excuse to. The robot slammed a fist into the ground, cracking the concrete and blowing debris everywhere. Izuku would have grinned, but instead he sighed. A girl was stuck, and Izuku was a nice and perfectly heroic examinee. Izuku jumped off the roof, rolling as he landed, then immediately started using push to shove the concrete blocks off the girl. Once enough was cleared, Izuku used pull so she was yanked towards him. He caught her easily, bridal style, then gave her a pretty smile that made her go pink in the face. Considering his next move, Izuku set her on her feet. Go on, get to safety, he said evenly. Then he turned back to the robot and shut his eyes for dramatic effect. He put both hands up and took a deep breath as the robot closed in. Using push, he shoved the robot so hard it stumbled backwards into a building, then used pull to yank its whole core out and as many electric wires as he could. It flew right at Izuku, who sidestepped it. Then he gently pushed the girl out of the way too. The robot collapsed backwards, slamming into nearby buildings and sending metal in every direction. To be polite, Izuku pushed every projectile aimed at the students away with a smile. Oh, how heroic he was. Look at him. He was so cool. That was when the exam ended. Izuku sighed as Mike yelled and started back towards the entrance. He accepted the gummies recovery girl gave him with a nod before leisurely heading back to the main campus. Izuku left UA and took the train home, unlocking the door and stepping inside without delay. He then blinked as he shut the door behind him. Izuku, welcome home, his mother said with an amused inflection. He snickered as he switched to the indoor shoes he found by the door. Nice place we have. The pictures are real cute. Izuku raised his eyebrow at the framed pictures of a baby Izuku with a very anxious Tamura holding him like glass figurine. The pictures were real, so were most of the others, but Tamura had green hair in every single one of them. There was also an absence of gloves on Tamura's untrained hands. Obviously, they had been modified. Hisashi thought they'd make the place more welcoming and authentic. She laughed. Oh, he wanted to give you a quirk today, in preparation for the detective's visit. Kurojiri will take you. Sounds good. Izuku smiled, barely containing his excitement. Because Kurojiri was seemingly omniscient, he appeared as if called and created a portal directly beneath Izuku's feet. Kind of him. Izuku. Izuku heard his father's voice as he fell through the portal and slammed into the floor of his father's office with an oof as he landed on his ass. Hiya, Dad. Izuku wheezed as he climbed to his feet. His dad smiled. The detective plans on visiting tomorrow morning. Everything is going as planned. I still can't believe you officially added us to the quirk registry. Izuku groaned, rubbing his aching tailbone. Spies are handy. I'll give you that. You put your fake quirk on your application and the apartment's address. Adjustments needed to be made. Identities created, families moved, and all that. His father smiled. Here, I have a quirk for you. Izuku walked over to stand by Hisashi's desk and let his dad put a hand on his head. The new quirk felt like lies. It felt like smoke, untouchable, able to slip through fingers without resistance. It curled inside his throat, as if mist and secrets spilled from his lips and leaked from his vocal cords. It tasted like protection melding with his mind. It made him shiver. It's an immunity quirk. Izuku gasped as he felt the drawback slam into him in response to the new quirk. Izuku had never been drunk, but damn did it feel like it whenever he got a new quirk. His head was spinning, and he felt like giggling like a maniac. It allows the user to block mental quirks. It activates manually, like a switch. Exactly right, Izuku. His dad praised as Izuku shook his head to clear his jumbled thoughts. It means, when activated, you'll be protected from analysis quirks, search quirks, and anything mental that can't be otherwise avoided. Now, why have I given this to you? Detective Tsukachi. Izuku blinked. This way I can lie to him, instead of just answering evasively. Right again. Hisashi grinned. Your mom had a boyfriend who abandoned her before she met me and had you, so she can imply he was your father instead of me. She has helped with Tamura's education, so she has no need to lie. She'll have to be careful, though. They cannot arrest any of you because everything you tell them will be the truth, according to Tsukachi's quirk, but they can arrest your mother and brother if you don't take control of the situation. Although, maybe deactivate it to lie occasionally. Nobody is always honest. It could tip him off that you're somehow tricking his quirk. I got this. Izuku grinned, playing with turning it on and off. I would like to remind you how disappointed I am in you, though. Izuku wilted. Showing your face to the detective without any kind of caution or thought put us in danger, and I am trusting you to make it right. I know. Izuku swallowed heavily. And I'm sorry. Don't fail me, Izuku. All for One said softly. Don't worry, Izuku smiled. I have a family to protect. Izuku, get the door. Inko called sweetly as the doorbell chimed the next day. Izuku climbed off the couch, abandoning the fake homeschooling papers his mother had laid out for the occasion. All part of the facade. Can I help you? Izuku asked, frowning as if he were confused as he opened the door. We're not expecting guests. He made sure Quirk Immune was active before he said it. Midoriya, we'd like to come in. Tsukachi said with a harsh glare. Eraserhead was behind him. He had cleaned up, his hair was tied back, and he was out of his baggy hero jumpsuit. Izuku frowned harder at them. I'm sorry, you can't come in. Izuku said. I don't know who you are, and strangers aren't allowed inside. Tsukachi recoiled physically, turning to Eraser with an expression that screamed what the fuck. He's telling the truth. Tsukachi muttered to Eraserhead under his breath. They probably thought Izuku couldn't hear it, but he did. Listen In was a hearing quirk he'd picked up when he was about 12 to sharpen his hearing. It allowed him to hear conversations he otherwise wouldn't be able to hear. Not super powerful, since it only allowed him to hear conversations and not all sounds, but definitely handy. Bye, I hope you have a nice day. Izuku went to shut the door, but a hand shot out and grabbed it, preventing Izuku from shutting it. Wait! Tsukachi exclaimed. Izuku slowly opened the door wider again with narrowed eyes. I am Detective Tsukachi, and this is Pro Hero Eraserhead. We're here about your application to UA. Oh, are you here with my exam results? Izuku raised an eyebrow. I was told they'd send a letter, and it's way too soon. Are you sure you're from UA? Do you have proof of identity? Inko appeared behind Izuku, her eyes wide and innocent. Tsukachi nodded to her. Yes, ma'am. He pulled out his police badge and showed it to her. Eraserhead flashed his hero license. Well then, come on in. She smiled and Izuku stepped aside with a reluctant frown painted on his face. Izuku flopped down on the couch and started mindlessly doing the math that he was supposedly meant to be doing for his imaginary homeschooling. You can sit if you like. Izuku heard his mother say. The detective and Eraser came inside and sat down on the opposite couch, while Inko came to sit next to Izuku. He pretended to be focused on his work as she ran a hand through his curls and glanced at his work with an approving nod. So, you said you're here about UA? Inko prompted. Izuku glanced up to see Tsukachi looking faintly panicked, probably because he had no idea what to say. Yes. We're here to ask a few questions, he said, glancing at Eraser. The hero sighed. My name is Aizawa Shoda, and I'm a homeroom teacher at UA. Eraserhead said tiredly. We decided to be more careful about selections this year and are interviewing students we have our eyes on. Sometimes they get in, sometimes they don't, however, so this isn't a guarantee for his acceptance. Thank you for clarifying. Inko smiled at them. What did you want to ask? Mother, who was at the door? Tamura entered right when he was supposed to, blinking in false surprise at the two men on his couch. Oh, hi. Tamura, this is Detective Tsukachi and one of the teachers at UA. She smiled at him. Tamura's job was to confuse the officers and sell the whole family thing. Basically, he was just distracting them. Did the little idiot get expelled already? Tamura grinned, coming over to ruffle Izuku's hair. Hey, mean, Izuku said, looking up to stick his tongue out. I did not. I wouldn't be surprised if you did, you little menace. Tamura teased. Izuku turned off Quirk Immune for only a moment. I am not a menace. Izuku stated, I am a treasure. He then activated Quirk Immune again. Tamura laughed and grabbed one of Izuku's homework sheets and held it above his head. What ya gonna do, shorty? He teased, making Izuku jump off the couch and try to grab it. Maybe it'd be better if you were expelled. You're so short. Give it back, Izuku exclaimed while laughing, then ran after his brother as Tamura dipped. Boys. Oh dear. They heard their mother sigh as they ran out. This quest is the best, Tamura declared as Izuku slammed his bedroom door dramatically. Tamura ripped the paper in half and cackled. Did you see their faces? No, but I bet they weren't very happy. Izuku giggled. Come on, give me the homework. I gotta go and complain about my horribly mean older brother. Tamura snickered as he handed it over. Want to play Mario Kart after they leave? Absolutely. Izuku grinned. He waved to his brother and then left the room with mock annoyance in his expression. Mother! Izuku yelled into the house. He heard her dramatic sigh as he came back into the room with a frown. Mora ripped up my maths. Oh baby, I'll print you another one. She used pull to gently take the papers from him as he crossed his arms. He locked himself in his room, so I can't even rip up his maths. Izuku scowled. You know how he feels about maths, Izuku. He'd probably thank you for it. It was true, and it made Izuku huff in amusement. Sorry, detective, you were asking about Izuku wanting to be a hero? That's right. I want to know why he applied to UA. Tsukachi nodded. Inko looked at Izuku pointedly, and he plopped down with a sigh. Time to lie. Heroes are annoying, and sometimes they don't do things right. Izuku huffed, trying to decide on his fake motivation to be a hero. I think I can make a difference. I know I'm abrasive, and I don't like making friends, and the only person I really like is my brother, but saving people sounds sort of cool. He smiled at the two men. Besides, I think a desk job would be so boring. Tsukachi shuddered visibly at the word, but his mother laughed. You've been saying that for years, Izuku, she said, smiling. Izuku has always said he'll never ever do a desk job. He can't stand being bored. Izuku grinned at her, then looked back at his papers as if deciding which one to do next. Is there anything else, detective? No, I believe I have everything, he said, obviously frustrated and confused. You'll receive the results of your exam by the end of the week. Izuku looked up to grin at them with a nod. As the two men left, Izuku activated range, a more advanced hearing quirk that he hated because it allowed him to hear any and all sounds in a 100-foot radius, even through walls. It always gave him a migraine trying to focus with it active. He shut his eyes to concentrate on the two men who shut the door behind themselves. He must be getting around my quirk somehow, Izuku heard Tsukachi say immediately. At the station he admitted he was Midoriya Izuku. This kid, that's definitely drop-off. Or drop-off had a way around your quirk. Aizawa sighed. I don't see any evidence Midoriya Izuku is a villain. He said he wants to be a hero. I already said he must have a way around my quirk. Tsukachi said. They even look the same. Same face, same name, it can't be a coincidence. Tsukachi, has it ever occurred to you that Drop-Off might have a quirk that allowed him to shapeshift? Eraser responded tiredly. It's likely he showed us a false face to throw us off. Drop-Off was intelligent, cocky, and uncaring to a fault. The Midoriya we just met is intelligent, childish, and honest. You only signaled one lie the entire time, and it was when he denied being a menace to his older brother. But Drop-Off has a brother. Do you have any idea how many people in this world have brothers? Eraserhead sounded absolutely done with life. It made Izuku grin. Whoever Drop-Off is, that's not him. The Midoriyas are innocent. I don't get it, Tsukachi said, completely ignoring Eraserhead's words. The mother said she had a boyfriend who left her before Izuku was born. Could that have been all for one? Tsukachi, I'm serious. Drop it. You heard what Drop-Off's mother said on the phone. She clearly stated all for one was still around. Clearly he didn't abandon anyone. But I said drop it, Tsukachi. The footsteps Izuku could hear stopped. Eraserhead's voice was lethal. I'll remove you from the Drop-Off case if you keep accusing an innocent child. He passed your little test, and he did it with honesty. The evidence says it's not him. Leave them alone. Satisfied, Izuku opened his eyes and turned off the quirk. It had already given him a headache. So what did they say? His mother asked, raising an eyebrow. We're safe. Izuku sighed, rubbing his temple ruefully. Tsukachi is mad, but Eraser yelled at him for accusing an innocent family and not letting it go even after proof they were innocent. Tsukachi will definitely still be suspicious, but Eraser is on our side. Wonderful. She laughed. What did they ask while I was with Tamura? Izuku tilted his head. They just asked about your father. Inko grinned. I told them I was abandoned by a boyfriend before you were born. They didn't bother asking how long ago it was, so I didn't mention it was when I was 19. They assumed he was my father and abandoned you while you were pregnant with me. Smart. Izuku laughed. His mother smiled fondly, then grinned. I'll make katsudon for dinner for the occasion. She grinned even wider as Izuku gasped. Oh, thank you, Mama. He hugged her tightly and then pulled back with a laugh. I'm off to lose horribly at Mario Kart, bye. His mother's laughter followed him through the house, and he grinned. Another day, another villainous success. What more could he ask for, really? Chapter 3. Acceptance. Izuku was dragging a body to the police station, humming. He'd taken another quirk. It was impossible to pass up. Feature Shift allowed the user to change and mold their features however they want. Colors, shapes, everything. It was annoying it only applied to the face and hair, though. Imagine the possibilities if he could add extra arms to himself. That was a spectacular quirk. Currently, Izuku was wearing a face that looked like Tamura's. He had a skin rash across his eyes and a scar through his lip, messy and long blue hair with red eyes and no freckles. He also changed his vocal cords a little, which was why he was humming. In general, Izuku found the sensation of Feature Shift uncomfortable. It felt like his skin was stretched too far and yet pinched in every way. His hair felt like he'd been wearing a ponytail for too long, and his throat hurt like he'd been screaming all day. Not impossible to manage, but also not very pleasant. As he reached the station, Izuku threw the body at the door and smiled at the satisfying thump it made against the glass. The doors didn't break, and he couldn't see through the frosted tint, but the glass always made a happy little noise. Tsukachi seemed to be camping by the door, though, because he burst out of the police station and tripped over the body, making Izuku laugh. It felt odd with his new vocal cords, but a laugh was a laugh no matter what voice did it. Drop off. You fooled Eraser, but you can't trick me, Tsukachi yelled. Oh, did you finally guess that I was the one to steal your adorable little recording device and all the camera footage? Izuku asked, playing dumb. So it was you, Tsukachi exclaimed. Damn, giving myself away. Oopsie. Izuku laughed, and then quite suddenly Eraserhead's scarf came out of nowhere and yanked him backwards. Hey. Izuku activated Blink, but his hood snagged and came right off as he landed a short distance away from Eraser. He landed in a crouch, trying not to wobble too much, and then he glared at Eraser. Well, that was rude. Izuku pulled his hood back up and tucked his blue hair behind his ears so it didn't get in his face. Maybe he should clip his hood on. It had fallen off before. What? Izuku looked at Tsukachi and found him staring at Izuku's red eyes in disbelief. I bring you a perfectly good villain body, and this is what I get. Izuku teased, standing up from his crouch position. How inconsiderate of you. We arrested you once, and we'll do it again. Eraserhead said. Izuku gave him a fleeting glance and grinned behind his mask. I'd like to see you try. Izuku blinked away with a grin and then landed on his ass in his kitchen. It wasn't until he'd melted his features away and hopped to his feet that he realized he'd teleported to the wrong house. Sighing, Izuku blinked again and crashed into the correct kitchen back at the apartment. Oh hey Zu. Izuku looked up to see Tamura grinning down at him. Hey Mura. He replied. What's you hey? His older brother kicked him in the shoulder and then laughed at Izuku's pout. That was mean. Izuku sat up and rubbed his shoulder dramatically. Mama, Tamura kicked me. Don't provoke him if you don't want to get kicked. Inko's voice rang through the house. I didn't provoke him. Izuku yelled back, offended. I was minding my own business. Suyour Izuku, she called. Izuku glared at his brother who was shaking with silent laughter and a hand over his mouth. You're dead. Izuku grinned. Tamura sprinted away, and Izuku jumped to his feet to run after him. Tamura slammed his bedroom door, but Izuku blinked into Tamura's room and slammed into his brother hard. Oof! They tumbled to the ground and Tamura hit his elbows harshly on the floor, while Izuku landed on top of him. Uh-huh. I have you now. Izuku pressed his hands to his brother's chest to hold him down, but Tamura's legs twisted against his and rolled them as he grinned widely. Hey, boys! They both froze and looked at the door as their mother pulled it open. She sighed. Break it up you two. Izuku, your letter is here. Inko gave them both a stern look and left the room. Ugh. Izuku dropped his head in defeat, and Tamura pushed off him with his hands on Izuku's chest. Hey! Izuku wheezed as Tamura climbed off him and sent his brother a glare. You started it. Tamura shrugged as Izuku climbed to his feet. I did not. Izuku exclaimed. You kicked me. Nope. Tamura grinned. I was minding my own business and you started chasing me. Izuku, stop bothering Tamura and come open your letter. Inko called from the living room. I hate you. Izuku hissed at his very smug older brother. This isn't over. Tamura just stuck out his tongue. Izuku and Tamura headed into the living room, but they ended up having a minor shoving competition in the hallway that Izuku won when Tamura hit the wall. Here, Inko smiled as she handed him a thick, white envelope. Izuku glared at it before he took it from her. He opened it with an unhappy frown while Tamura grinned unsympathetically, and then all three of them blinked in surprise when a heavy disc fell out of the envelope and landed on the floor with a thud. Then All Might's face was on their living room wall. I am here, as a projection. Tamura shrieked, backing up with a glare that could cut glass and clutching his hands to his chest so he wouldn't accidentally decay something in his anger, and Izuku recoiled harshly enough to bump into Tamura with a shriek of his own. Their mother, of course, simply glared at the projection and crossed her arms. I came to this town to work at UA, and I am here with your exam results. All Might's in Mizuta-fu, Tamura exclaimed. He's teaching at UA? Izuku screeched at the same time. Inko shushed them both. You received top marks in the written exam. Excellent work, young Midoriya. On top of that, you collected 68 points in the practical exam. However, All Might held up a pausing finger with a grin. There is also a secret scoring given by a panel of judges, as another basic ability we at UA look at. A scoreboard showed on the hologram, showing 53 RP and 68 VP in first place. Midoriya Izuku was written right next to it. Midoriya Izuku, 121 points. All Might declared. I take it back, push and pull is completely OP. Tamura blurted. Izuku grinned. The scoreboard disappeared to show All Might holding out a beckoning hand towards the camera with a wide smile. Welcome, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academy. I might pass out. Izuku groaned. Why this year? Why me? Hirojiri, take me to Dad. I need to ask him to fake my death. Hirojiri materialized in a swirl of purple, but no portal opened. Your father sends his regards and warns you to exercise restraint. Hirojiri said calmly as Izuku choked. All Might is not your goal. You are to continue your punishment with no changes. God fucking damn it. Izuku raged. What about me? Tamura asked excitedly. Can I kill All Might? No. Can I kill All Might? Inko asked with narrowed eyes. Also no. This is it, I'm done for. Izuku lamented as he fell face first onto the couch. I'll die because my blood pressure gets too high from restraining the urge to use separate on All Might. Oh, Izuku, Kurojiri said, making Izuku look up from his moping. Your father wants to compliment you on your stunt at the police station today. Huh. Whether it was intentional or not, Tsukachi has now seen you wearing a face aside from your real Midoriya Izuku face. Izuku blinked. Oh yeah, he'd been wearing Tamura's face. Eraserhead is using that as yet another piece of evidence against Tsukachi's accusations. Oh, fantastic. Izuku grinned. Is it a problem I was wearing Tamura's face? Excuse me. No, your father doesn't believe Tsukachi will make the connection. Tamura's skin condition has improved over the years, and his hair is green at the moment. Kurojiri ignored Tamura. However, it is best if you do not use Tamura's face in front of Tsukachi again. Noted. Izuku sighed, dropping his face back into the couch cushions. Kurojiri left with an audible swirl of his misty form, and Izuku let out a muffled scream into the couch cushion. Izuku. He felt one of his mother's soft hands start to stroke his curls. Just because you can't kill All Might doesn't mean you can't make his life miserable. What? Izuku sat up so fast his mother was left blinking in surprise. How? For one, you don't have to pretend to like him. Inko grinned. You can insult him, ignore him, or outright glare at him as much as you want. There's plenty of people who don't like heroes, and you admitted to Eraserhead and Tsukachi that you believe most heroes mess things up more than they help. Yes. Izuku's eyes widened. Mama, you're a genius. Chapter 4, Quirk Assessment Part 1. I want to die, Izuku declared, glaring at his reflection. I think you look good, his mother said brightly, brushing a curl out of his face. No, I'd want to die too if I was wearing a UA uniform, Tamura said thoughtfully, not to mention the shoulder dots. Embarrassing. What's wrong with the shoulder dots? Inko frowned, reaching to touch the single metal stud on the uniform's shoulder. Each course has a different number of dots on their shoulders. Izuku sighed. Hero course has one, closest to their neck. General education has one dot in the same spot, and another one lower on the shoulder, and so on. You get the idea. See, Tamura snickered. Hero course. Talk about embarrassing. Mura, I will hunt you for sport. Izuku snapped, making his brother laugh. Here I am with a present for you, and you're handing out threats. Tamura let out a dramatic sigh. I guess you don't want it. Suddenly, I'm no longer feeling murderous. Izuku grinned and made grabby hands at his brother. Gimme. Tamura laughed, and he pulled a black binder out from one of the living room tables and handed it over. You told me about making those paper airplanes during the orientation, Tamura said as Izuku opened the binder. That's paper specifically to help idiots like you make airplanes properly. Oh my gosh, Izuku exclaimed, beaming. Thank you, Tamura. Don't mention it, Zu. Tamura messed up his curls with a grin. You have to go, Izuku. His mother smiled fondly, looking between Izuku and his brother fondly. Wouldn't want to be late on your first day? Yes, I would. Izuku grumbled, crossing his arms. He tucked the binder away in his bag, and then he pulled the backpack on to awkwardly adjust the uncomfortable straps. Tamura grinned in amusement, and Izuku stuck his tongue. Thanks for the paper, but I still hate you. If you die from your sulky dramatics, I'll be sure to bury you with your maths homework. Tamura responded as Izuku headed for the door. That way you can have it with you in the afterlife. Screw off, Mura. At least I can actually do quadratic equations, unlike you. Izuku yelled back and then slammed the door to cut off his brother's offended sputtering. With one last huff, Izuku headed out of the apartment building and headed for the train station. People gave him smiles on his way. They probably assumed that if they wished him luck, they could someday say they supported that one hero, insert cringy hero name, before they was popular. Gatekeeping behavior, honestly. Too bad for them. Izuku was never going to have a cringy hero name for them to support because he was never going to be a hero, and they didn't assign hero names until second year at the earliest anyway. Izuku looked up at Yue, holding his backpack straps and feeling like an idiot, and he only had one thought. EW. School. Like a good child who definitely wanted to be a hero, Izuku entered the building and headed for the 1A classroom. He'd memorized it on the map he'd been given when his uniform arrived. One thing was for sure, Izuku was not going to be one of the embarrassingly idiotic students who arrived late because they had no idea where they were going. As expected of UA, the door he arrived at was a bajillion feet high and screamed money. It just made Izuku sigh as he shoved the door open. There were about 10 people inside, half the class, and Izuku ignored them as he plopped down in his seat and pulled out the binder Tamura had given him. Just like Tamura said, the papers had guidelines on them. They were dotted and showed him exactly where to fold the flaps. Izuku concentrated as he folded the little flaps, his tongue peeking out of his mouth as he tried his very best not to fuck it up, and when he finished he gasped in delight at the perfect-looking plane. "So you managed to make a plane that didn't look like shit?" Izuku looked up as he recognized the voice. It was the hypnosis quirk user. "Yep, my brother got me airplane paper." Izuku proudly showed off the binder full of paper. "Now I'll have a whole army of perfect little airplanes." Izuku grinned up at the boy who was staring with a raised eyebrow. "You're insane," he commented. "I'm aware." Izuku nodded. "Did you need something?" The boy raised a hand to rub the back of his neck with a sheepish grin that made Izuku raise an eyebrow. "I just wanted to say thank you for telling me about the rescue points," the boy said, eyes not on Izuku as he spoke. "I wouldn't have gotten in otherwise." "Oh sure," Izuku said, waving him off. "Heroic shit, right? Sharing is caring and all that." He rolled his eyes and went back to his airplane. "Right," the boy muttered. "Look, do you hate me or something?" Izuku looked up at him and frowned when he saw the boy's eyebrows drawn together in hurt confusion. "Why would I hate you?" Izuku asked. "You were sitting with my school. Did they tell you anything?" "No, should they have?" Izuku raised an eyebrow as the boy frowned harder. "You meant it when you said you don't do friends." The boy sighed. Izuku nodded, looking back at his desk to start on a second plane. "Not really a people person," Izuku admitted, folding an edge carefully. "My brother's the only one who can put up with my shit." "So it's because you've never had friends, then?" Shinso frowned. "And you have." Izuku raised an eyebrow, again, looking the boy up and down. "You seem to be trying desperately to talk to me, which means you probably want to be my friend but don't know how to say it because you don't do friends either." The boy blinked for a moment before he grinned. It was all teeth, but it seemed genuine. "I'm Shinso," the boy introduced. "Midoriya," Izuku said, going back to folding his airplane. "Since neither of us do the whole friend thing, let's not be friends." "So we're acquaintances?" "No," Izuku denied, folding another flap carefully. "Can't we just be two people who know each other, and we'll probably stick together because neither of us want to be friends with the idiots we have for classmates?" "Fair enough." Izuku noticed Shinso shrug. "Go somewhere else if you're here to make friends," a quiet voice said from the doorway, and Izuku froze. He knew that voice. This is the hero course. He'd either been lying on the floor or sitting on the floor, because when Izuku looked towards the door, Eraserhead was in the process of standing up and wearing what looked like an old yellow sleeping bag. Odd way to introduce yourself to a class, but all right. "Okay, it took 8 seconds before you were quiet," Eraser said tiredly, unzipping and then stepping out of the sleeping bag. "Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough." Eraser then stepped fully inside the classroom and looked around at the class. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda. Nice to meet you." Reaching into the sleeping bag, he pulled out a handful of gym uniforms. "It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out onto the field." "Shit." Izuku laid his head down on his desk. "Exercise." Shinso snorted, which did not help. "We'll be doing a quirk assessment test," Eraser said once everyone was out on the field. Izuku ignored the way half the class immediately started screaming or complaining, choosing to focus on using only pull to attract his plane towards one hand and then the other. It was difficult, which was why he was doing it. "You kids have been doing these since middle school too, right?" Izuku looked up at that, because he genuinely did not do whatever Eraser was referencing because he hadn't gone to middle school. Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from results from students not using their quirks. It's not rational. Well, the Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Then, Eraser looked right at Izuku. "Midoriya," You finished at the top of the physical exam. In middle school, what was your best result for the softball throw? Ah. Izuku blinked blankly at Eraser for a moment. I was homeschooled. I never went to middle school. The teacher sighed heavily. It doesn't really matter. He muttered. Go into the circle and do it using your quirk. Izuku walked forward in confusion and took the ball Eraser handed him. Everyone, keep your own scores in mind and watch. Midoriya, you can do anything as long as you don't leave the circle. Hurry up, give it all you got. Izuku stood in the circle, stared at the ball, and then glanced up at Eraser. I just throw it. Eraser nodded, and Izuku shrugged. All right. Izuku tossed the ball straight upwards, and then he flicked his fingers and pushed it as hard as he could. The ball went flying, disappearing in seconds and zipping off into the distance. After a moment, Izuku flicked his fingers again, adding a little bit of lift upwards, and sent the ball even further. He did it again, and again, and again. Midoriya, you can stop now. Eraser sighed finally. Izuku glanced over at him curiously. All right. Izuku crossed his arms and waited, looking out towards where the ball had disappeared, and a moment later Eraser's phone beeped. Know your own maximum first, Eraser said, glancing at the phone. That's the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. Then Eraser held up the phone for the class to see. 16.09 kilometers / 16,093.4 m. The class exploded. People were gaping and yelling, and a few were cheering, and several were even glaring. Izuku just uncrossed his arms and walked back to Shinso, who was one of the people with their jaws on the floor. Izuku spotted his airplane nearby, and he zipped it towards his hand with a grin. How did you do that? Shinso exclaimed. I just used my quirk. Izuku shrugged. This looks like fun, a girl exclaimed, bouncing in place. Did you guys see what he did? So cool. Awesome. Someone laughed. We get to use our quirks as much as we want, as expected of the hero course. Izuku watched Eraser with curiosity as his expression shifted. It looks fun, huh? Eraser repeated the girl's words quietly. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Izuku couldn't help but grin a little wickedly in response to the amused grin that slid onto Eraser's face. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion. The class broke out in exclamations of shock. Finally, something interesting. Izuku grinned. Shinso gave him a terrified look that Izuku ignored. Last place will be expelled, but it's the first day of school. Someone yelled louder than all the rest. Ah, Izuku knew that one. She was the helpless one he'd saved from the 0-pointer. No, even if it wasn't the first day, this is too unfair. Eraser's face twisted at the girl's words, and he glared at the class with grave seriousness written all over his face. Natural disasters, big accidents, selfish villains, calamities whose time or place can't be predicted. Japan is covered in unfairness. Aizawa spoke softly, yet there was anger laced through it. Heroes are those who reverse those situations. If you wanted to go talk with your friends at Mickey D's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years, UA will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Aizawa grinned, one finger beckoning the same way All Might had in the acceptance video. Overcome it with all you've got. Izuku shook out his hands and grinned, noticing how his classmates were finally getting serious. Oh, Izuku hoped desperately that someone would be expelled. He'd laugh his ass off if it happened. All right, demonstration's over. Eraser sighed. The real thing starts now. Eraser then walked off, and Izuku was the first one to walk after him. The class scrambled then, clearly surprised they were supposed to follow their teacher. Honestly, were they intelligent at all? How long could you have kept the ball going? Shinso asked as they walked. Indefinitely. Izuku guessed. My quirk doesn't make me tired. I've never had quirk exhaustion. That was a lie, but only sorta. Steel fueled his many quirks whenever he needed them. He only ever encountered a problem when he used like 6 of his quirks at once, and that only gave him a mild headache. Steel itself wasn't the same though. One time he'd taken 5 quirks in one night, and he'd passed out from the pure, overwhelming euphoria he felt. He'd been more careful after that. But his other quirks? Nah. Geez. Shinso sighed. I'd die for a quirk like that. My brother says I'm a poor weakling of a hero. Izuku grinned. He only changed his mind when I received my acceptance letter. How many points did you get? Shinso looked like he didn't actually want to know, so Izuku cheerfully told him. 121. He grinned, and Shinso actually choked. I'm pretty sure it was 68 villain points and 53 rescue points. Jesus Christ. Shinso muttered. Izuku just shrugged with another grin. What's that? Izuku blinked as the class stopped. There were 2 tracks chalked off, a start line and a finish line for each lane, and a weird robot tripod stood at the end. It's the 50-yard dash. Shinso sighed. I'm jealous. Skipping middle school must have been amazing. Tamura ripped up my homework a lot. Izuku replied, eyeing the students lining up. Tamura's my brother, by the way. Yeah, I'd guessed as much. Izuku didn't reply to Shinso in favor of activating Steel to get a gauge on his new classmates. Information once again assaulted him, and he breathed in the relief he felt whenever he allowed Steel to reach out for knowledge. It was soothing. Rolling his shoulders, Izuku started sorting through his classmates. Speed quirk centered in the legs, powered by orange juice. Creation quirk with a mild intelligence boost, powered by fat stores. Tape emitter centered in the elbows. Acid secretion and immunity. Gravity altering with mild control of weightless subjects. Amphibious frog mutation. Tail mutation with minor strength enchantment. Explosions centered in the hands, powered by nitroglycerin secretion. Hardening, that's boring. Electricity generation and dispersion. Izuku stopped short, and his breath caught at the next one he felt. Midoriya? You okay? Shinso asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I'm fine. Izuku swallowed. Ice and fire. The split ability to use both fire and ice, possible to combine them and wield them both at the same time. So many possibilities. Steel ignored everything else and pulsed, begging to take it. Izuku wanted it. He wanted it worse than he'd wanted anything. Izuku knew it would taste like snow and sunshine, and he'd feel shivers across his skin, and it would burn down his throat. Midoriya, Shinso, you're up next. Eraser called. Izuku blinked and forcefully shut off Steel immediately, dizzy with desire he hadn't felt in years. He swallowed thickly, and he tried not to stumble as he walked towards the line. On your marks. A robot voice yelled. You good? Shinso asked with a frown. Izuku took a deep breath and grinned at him. Get set. I'm going to kick your ass. Izuku replied. A gunshot. Izuku reached out for the boy with the hardening quirk and activated pull. The boy stumbled, and he hardened on instinct. Izuku jumped, and he let pull yank him forward towards the boy. Izuku was propelled forward, and he deactivated pull when he started to lose momentum. Izuku rolled, jumped to his feet, and then he was across the finish line. 3.09 seconds. The robot voice chirped. 6.32 seconds. It said when Shinso caught up. Okay, what the fuck was that? Shinso gasped as he stopped next to him. Izuku shrugged. Just my quirk. Anyway, I'm gonna go thank the guy I snagged. Izuku said, I'll be back. Why? I thought you didn't do friends. Shinso accused with narrowed eyes. Izuku almost laughed when he realized Shinso was jealous. I don't. Izuku answered, amused. But I do know how to play nice with the sunshines. Shinso blinked in surprise, and then Izuku walked off and headed towards the very confused redhead with the hardening quirk. Hey, I just wanted to thank you. Izuku said as he caught the boy's attention. I used you as an anchor for my quirk. Your hardening is super useful. Izuku left out the fact that it was also boring. Oh, no problem, man. The boy grinned. My quirk's nothing special compared to yours. It's super manly. Everyone has their thing. Izuku shrugged, not bothering to disagree. If only he knew the truth of it. See ya. He waved, and the boy sent him an enthusiastic sharp-toothed grin as Izuku headed back toward Shinso. Before he reached Shinso, however, Eraser stopped him. Midoriya. Izuku turned to him and tilted his head. How long could you have kept up your quirk for the ball throw? Indefinitely. I don't get drawbacks from using my quirk. Izuku told him like he told Shinso. I could have kept it up until I got tired of standing in one place, or I got bored. 1. The score you earned during the demonstration was supposed to be an accurate representation of your quirk's abilities. Eraser told him tiredly. Since I stopped you early, and I don't think you're lying to me, I'm giving you an infinity on the ball throw. Oh, Izuku blinked. Thank you. Eraser just nodded and turned away, leaving Izuku to just blink some more. Well, that was certainly interesting. Shaking his head, Izuku once again headed for Shinso. What did Aizawa-sensei want? Shinso frowned as Izuku reached him. Apparently, he's changing my ball throw score to an infinity. Izuku shrugged. He said my previous score wasn't accurate enough. Shinso gaped at him, but Izuku walked off to follow the group as they moved on. Shinso scrambled after him, which made Izuku huff. It seemed Shinso was going to stick around, which Izuku found mildly vexing. He didn't need a lonely purple-haired kid following him around like they were friends. Okay, so what test is this? Izuku asked as they entered a building and looked around. Grip strength. Shinso pointed as where everyone was lining up to grab little handheld devices. We squeeze a grip tester as hard as we can and get a score based on how much pressure we can muster. Oh, interesting. Izuku tilted his head. He and Shinso grabbed one each, and Izuku examined it before sliding his hand in. Damn it, Shinso cursed, looking at his number. Izuku glanced over at it curiously. 63.04 kilograms. Interesting, Izuku hummed, looking back at his own device. Now I'm wondering if suffering through the endless boredom of middle school could have actually been worthwhile. It isn't. Shinso sighed, setting his device down. Go on, be cooler than the rest of us. Wow, 540 kilograms. What are you, a gorilla? Oh, an octopus. Izuku glanced over to see it was tape expulsion yelling, grinning at a tall boy Izuku hadn't sensed with steel. Even so, it was sort of obvious what his quirk was. He had several sets of arms. Looking back at the device he had in his hand, Izuku realized he was supposed to hold it at his side and squeeze it. Narrowing his eyes, Izuku had an idea. Setting his hand in place and holding the device at his side, Izuku squeezed and then used push to propel the pressure plate down as far as it could go, and then the little device beeped. Izuku lifted it and then blinked at the screen. He then raised his hand hesitantly. Sensei? Izuku called. I think I broke mine. Shinso just sighed, and Eraser headed over. What now? Izuku handed over the device, and Eraser blinked blankly at it before sighing. Problem child. Error it read, and a little infinity symbol sat next to it. Eraser just walked away and took the device with him. Izuku blinked in confusion, and Shinso sighed again. Chapter 5, Quirk Assessment Part 2. Can you go 5 minutes without being shocked at how powerful you are? Shinsu's voice was tired, but it was also a little bitter when he spoke. Izuku frowned. I haven't used the quirk much. Izuku defended, and then he paused when he saw Shinsu's confused expression. I mean, how was I supposed to practice? It's sort of illegal to use your quirk without a license. I've only used it around the house, like with my airplanes. Oh, fair enough, Shinso muttered. Izuku nodded, internally relieved that Shinso had bought the excuse. Izuku would much rather be taking his classmates' quirks than assessing his own, especially since it was just 2 quirks he'd chosen to use while he was undercover as a hero student. Hey, Izuku looked up to see the redhead heading over and sighed. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kirishima. Midoriya. Izuku nodded. This is Shinso, he added when Shinso just glared. I saw Aizawa-sensei take your grip tester. What did you get? Kirishima asked, grinning happily. Infinity. Izuku shrugged. Awesome, man, Kirishima exclaimed. As I said before, your quirk is great. Thanks. Izuku sighed. Look, I don't really do friends. So if that's what you want, I really couldn't care less. That's all right. We don't have to be friends to hang out. Kirishima waved him off with a grin. Hey, are you excited about the other tests? Not really. I have no idea what they are. Izuku shrugged as he followed him and left the building, and then glared at the sun when his eyes had to adjust to the brightness of the outdoors. Oh yeah, you said you were homeschooled. Kirishima blinked. Well, we have the long jump, and of course the ball throw. There's also repeated side steps, seated toe touches, sit-ups, and I can't remember the last one. He gave a sheepish smile. It's a long-distance run, Shinso told Kirishima dryly. Yeah, that. Kirishima grinned, completely undeterred by Shinsu's glaring. It made Izuku grin a little, seeing them interact. "What is this?" Izuku asked as he caught sight of an area covered in sand surrounded by a little blue lip that contained the sand. There was another one of the robot tripod things on one side. Why the sand? Izuku hated sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Yuck. Standing long jump. Shinso supplied. Oh, Izuku frowned. That should have been obvious. The standing long jump ended up being the most boring test yet. Izuku didn't even bother trying. He just stared disdainfully at the sand, jumped only about a meter forward, and stopped. Midoriya. Eraser sighed. What? Izuku gave him an innocent look. I hate sand. The rest of the standing long jump was just people staring at him like he was insane. Really, they should be thanking him. Because he got last on one of the tests, now nobody would be expelled. Eraser said he'd expel whoever gets last in every test, and now nobody could do that. So, really, it was a public service. Izuku did actually do the repeated side steps. Izuku did score fairly high, but only because his classmates were actual trash who didn't know how to apply their quirks properly to solve their problems. The ball throw was boring. Izuku had already gone, so really all he was doing was just standing around and watching his classmates throw a ball without their quirks. Hardening couldn't use his quirk, Acid couldn't use hers, Tape Elbows didn't use his, the guy with lots of arms kind of had to use his, but that didn't count, and so on and so on. There were only two people Izuku bothered to watch, and that was the Explosion user and the Gravity manipulator. Explosion Boy propelled the ball 705 meters, which was impressive. Even more impressive was how it looked. Smoke rings and fire and a feral grin. Izuku would have been inclined to grab him and ask him to be a villain, if the kid wasn't such a hero. He was angry because he wanted to be the best, not because he was angry at the world and wanted it to come crumbling down. Such wasted villain material, honestly. The Gravity Girl was just interesting because Izuku wanted her quirk. She had a boring, bubbly attitude that radiated blind faith and goodness, and it annoyed Izuku to no end. Her quirk, on the other hand, seemed useful. When he'd sensed it with Steel, it hadn't been enticing. It wasn't very powerful, and the drawbacks sucked, so Steel wasn't all that interested. However, Izuku thought it might be fun to be able to just send someone to space, and then just let them fall. Midoriya? Shinso called from the circle. Izuku blinked back into the present. What? Izuku's mind went quiet almost immediately. Walk into the circle. A voice spoke softly, and yet it bounced around in Izuku's ears with ominous coaxing power. Izuku melted at the feeling of the command washing over him, but it was odd that he complied despite not meaning to. It must be Shinsu's hypnosis quirk. Call and response based. Activate your quirk and send the ball as far away as you can. The voice coaxed. A smooth round object was placed in his hand, and Izuku briefly had the ability to choose what he wanted to do. Izuku had more than one quirk, and his body did not know how to comply with Shinsu's command. As best he could, Izuku shoved push towards the surface and allowed it to cooperate. Vaguely, Izuku realized he had tossed the ball above his head, and then practically shoved it through the air and sent it flying even faster than he had originally for his own ball throw. Keep the ball going as far as you can, and keep it off the ground. Izuku shuddered internally at the feeling of Shinsu's command settling, and couldn't deny the euphoria he felt from it. Steel was screaming at him, trembling in the back of Izuku's mind as Shinsu's quirk held him in place. Such unequivocal power. Izuku gasped as Shinso released him, and he bent over, pressed a hand on his chest and a hand on his knee. Then he realized he could move again. His head spun and his stomach lurched, but it only made Izuku more excited. Midoriya, you okay? Shinso asked it casually, but Izuku could tell how anxious he was. That was amazing. Izuku breathed, lifting his head so he could look at Shinso properly. Shinso seemed to blue screen, and then looked extremely confused. You're wasting time, Eraser said, drawing Izuku's attention. Whoever's next, get ready. Izuku took a deep breath and straightened, but he didn't move. Midoriya? Shinso asked. He'd taken a few steps forward, but he stopped when Izuku didn't follow. Sorry, give me a minute. I'm half high and I don't want to fall over. Izuku took another deep breath. He probably shouldn't be so honest. But steel was throbbing in the back of his mind, and his dad would kill him if he stole this kid's quirk and blew his cover. What? Shinso looked so completely baffled, it made Izuku laugh a little breathlessly. More stable, Izuku walked out of the circle and only stumbled a little bit. You good, Midoriya? Kirishima asked when Izuku had rejoined the crowd of classmates. You were totally zombie-like for a while there. I'm good. Izuku grinned. Really? Because you look like you're going to pass out. Shinso was watching Izuku suspiciously. I might. Izuku acknowledged with a bright laugh, and then he sent Shinso a pretty smile. That was really cool. Fuck, he wanted it so badly, fuck. How? Shinso frowned. Most people absolutely hate it because they have no control. Shinso. Izuku leaned forward and put his hands on Shinsu's shoulders. Your quirk is powerful, and I swear to God if you insult it, I'll murder you. You're lucky to have such a good quirk. I'm really leaving this quirk in the hands of an ungrateful idiot. Seriously? Izuku saw doubt in Shinsu's eyes, but he was also blushing lightly. Seriously. Izuku sighed, releasing him. Honestly, I'd love to have a quirk like that. What did it feel like? Kirishima asked, tilting his head. Being all zombie like that. All right, that's enough. Shinso exclaimed, waving his hands a little and not letting Izuku respond. We have to move on anyway. Next test. Izuku laughed, but he dutifully followed Shinso and the class to the next location with Kirishima tagging along behind him. Oh, this is sit-ups, Izuku said as they entered another building. It had long white mats laid out across the floor, and Izuku glanced at Shinso for confirmation as people started picking mats. Right? Yep. He nodded. We need partners. Pair with me. Fine. Izuku grabbed Shinso by the arm and ignored the yelp the boy left out as Izuku yanked him towards a mat. You know, I feel like we're friends. Shinso grinned once Izuku had released him and plopped down on the mat. Even though you don't do friends. Oh, we're not friends. Izuku hummed. However, you aren't allowed to leave now because I like your quirk too much. Shinso just blinked at him. I can't tell if you're being serious or not, he admitted. Izuku just grinned at him. Shinso had no idea how serious he was. Once he was done with his punishment at UA, he was so stealing Shinso's quirk as drop off. You go first, Izuku said simply, gesturing to the mat. Shinso sighed heavily, but he laid down to do his sit-ups. Izuku dutifully leaned on Shinsu's feet, but his mind wandered. What would he do once he had it? Obviously, he'd use it. Imagine how wonderful it would be to laugh at his victims and force them to do his bidding. How good would it feel to watch them walk themselves to the police station, or make them kill their own allies with their bare hands? Ugh. Shinso fell flat on the mat and didn't move. 32. Better than I did in middle school, though. Woo, accomplishments. Izuku rolled his eyes as he let go of Shinsu's ankles. Shinso gave him a deadpan look and moved to the side so Izuku could lay down instead. Shit, why are your calves muscular? Shinso exclaimed as soon as his hands were on Izuku's ankles. Because while you were in school, I was working out. Izuku grinned. He started his sit-ups as Shinso pressed down on his feet. Not that Izuku really needed that, but it was proper procedure and all that. How strong are you? Shinso asked with a frown. The uniforms in general aren't very flattering. Izuku noticed a racer walking back and forth, no doubt looking for cheating among the students. I'd say pretty strong. Izuku hummed in response, counting in the back of his mind. I've been training my entire life. Literally. He'd started training as soon as his quirk came in. His dad had taken one look at Izuku's quirk and flat out asked him if he wanted a place in the villain underworld like the one he was going to be giving Tamura, suggesting once that Izuku could even replace Tamura. Izuku had said no, but he'd asked to be trained anyway. Being defenseless wasn't really an option for the son of the king of the underground and the brother of the future king. You always knew you'd become a hero? Hearing Shinsu's question, Izuku activated quirk immune before answering. He could never be too careful. No, but my family thought it would be a good option for my quirk. Izuku answered semi-honestly. It was true, but not for heroics, the exact opposite. I've never liked the way heroes are, especially the ones up top like All Might and Endeavor. They're sort of completely trash. So I figure I can fix a lot of stuff if I can do better than them someday. Or kill them. That'd be good too. Are you just going to keep going? Shinso asked after a moment. What talking? No, the sit-ups. Shinso elaborated. Oh yeah, I'm still going. I'm starting to get a little tired, though. Izuku admitted. Jesus. What? Everyone else is done. Shinso said blandly. Izuku paused, but then he continued. Ah yes, my superiority has no end. Izuku finally started feeling an uncomfortable tiredness in his core and just flopped. All right, if everyone is done, there's no point in doing more. You could have done more. Izuku rolled into his stomach to see literally everyone watching him, and the electric user was staring at him with his mouth open. I mean, only about 40 more before it started being a chore, Izuku said, pushing up off the floor and popping to his feet. What did you get? Shinso asked, standing up as well. I stopped counting when you hit 100. Oh, 146. Izuku answered easily. Which test is next? The class finally stopped staring, and Aizawa tiredly pointed to the other side of the gym. Seated toe touch. Line up, everyone. People started towards the back wall, but Izuku made eye contact with someone across the room. He was looking at Izuku with narrowed eyes. Izuku could only stare back, completely frozen. It was the fire and ice user. Izuku hadn't seen him beyond feeling his intoxicating quirk, but he knew it was the boy staring at him. He was split down the middle just like his quirk, and his eyes stared at Izuku with sharp ice, yet burned with anger in a way that captivated Izuku entirely. It took his breath away, and he wanted that goddamn quirk. He wasn't sure which quirk he wanted more, Shinsu's hypnosis or the ice/fire one. One thing was for sure. Izuku was going to absolutely ruin that boy. He was going to rip him so far apart into so many tiny shreds there was nothing left but his beautiful quirk for Izuku to have on a silver platter. He was going to own him and have ice in his veins and fire at his fingertips. Midoriya? Shinsu's voice cut through the staring match, and the fire/ice boy looked away sharply. Izuku stared after him for a moment, and then turned to Shinso. Yeah, he acknowledged. Are we actually going to go over and do the seated toe touches? Oh, Izuku blinked. That right. Yes. He turned and headed over, Shinso trailing along behind him. Everyone was lined up standing by the wall, and Aizawa was standing in front of a little wooden thing that people were stretching their fingers towards to touch. I actually won't be good at this one. Izuku sighed, distracting himself from his slightly murderous and obsessive thoughts that did not belong in the Hero Course gym. He wasn't allowed to steal any quirks or murder anyone. Unfortunately, stretching has always been boring for me. And you only do things that are interesting? Shinso raised an eyebrow. I'm allergic to boredom. Izuku told him bluntly. I can't stand it. If I'm bored, I will immediately do something to become unbored. That's what the paper airplanes are for. Exactly. Izuku nodded. Isn't standing around while other people test boring? Shinso frowned. Actually, it can be pretty funny. Izuku grinned. Especially when people don't actually use their quirks properly. It's interesting to watch them mess it up so badly. Who's messing up? Shinso frowned harder. Izuku rolled his eyes with a huff. Pretty much everyone except for explosions, the mutation kids, and, the ice one. Izuku stuttered over fire/ice boy because technically Izuku wasn't supposed to know he had fire abilities. The boy hadn't shown it at all. It was a total waste which Izuku would remedy the moment he had the power at his fingertips. But the acid girl could have slid on her acid during the first test. Creation girl could have done so much more than she did. Ironically, I'd say she has absolutely no creativity whatsoever. Okay, and the sparkly one. I can't. I just can't at this point. Midoriya. Izuku blinked as Eraser called his name, and Izuku realized it was his turn. He rolled his eyes at Shinso, and then dutifully headed over to do the boring stretches. Izuku bent forward, his fingers going a few inches past his toes, but not much farther, and Eraserhead marked down a number. Izuku didn't really care what the number was, so he just got up and walked to where the kids who were done were standing. Shinso joined him soon after. All we have left is the long-distance run. Kirishima grinned happily as they left the building. Do you think Eraser would be mad if I just sabotaged everyone to win? Izuku thought aloud. Please don't. Eraser's tired voice called to him, apparently having heard. I need actual results. What if I just sabotage? Don't make me have to start doing individual runs. Eraser sighed. This is supposed to be a group test. Fine. Izuku pouted. Spoil sport. Why would you need to sabotage anyone? Kirishima asked curiously. Aren't you already in the lead? Yeah, but I don't really care about that. Izuku shrugged. I'd much rather be losing if it meant the people around me were powerful. Powerful people were the best people to challenge because they made everything so much more interesting. That makes sense. Kirishima grinned. Shinso frowned at him, but Izuku just grinned back at Kirishima. All right, everyone, to the line. Eraser grumbled. Midoriya, if you throw this test, I'll expel you. God damn it. Izuku swore. You mean I actually have to run? Everyone is supposed to run. Eraser glared. Get in line. Fuck, I hate running. Izuku scowled as he took a spot in the line. Why? Are you bad at it? Shinso asked, standing next to him. No, it's just boring. Izuku complained. It's just running and breathing and running and breathing, and then trying not to run into things while breathing some more. That's a lot of breathing. Kirishima grinned, and Izuku threw up his hands. Exactly. On your marks. Izuku blinked at the robotic voice and spotted the little tripod robot next to Eraser. Get set. Izuku sighed as he bent his knees. Then he took off as he heard the telltale gunshot noise. Shinso was immediately lost as Izuku overtook the people who were just running. Speed Boy and Creation Girl were ahead because duh, and Fire/Ice Boy was about the same as Izuku. He was breathing out frost, and Izuku vaguely wished he could know what it would be like to stand right in front of the boy and feel that frost on his skin. Throughout the whole test, Izuku was basically just running with Fire/Ice Boy while explosions angrily tailed them. He couldn't seem to keep up, and he was swearing up a storm about it. Izuku guessed quirk exhaustion had something to do with it because Explosion Boy occasionally stopped exploding in favor of running. At the end of the test, Izuku crossed the finish line a tiny bit after Fire/Ice Boy, and it made him laugh with delight. The boy just gave him a cold look, and Izuku wished he could have a glare like that pointed at him more often. The power. When everyone was finished, half the class looked just about ready to collapse or pass out. Shinso was one of them. Okay, I'll quickly tell you the results. Eraser said to the gathered students. The total is simply the marks you got from each test. It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you the results all at once. He pressed a button, and then a scoreboard appeared. 1. Midoriya Izuku. 2. Yaoyorozu Momo. 3. Todoroki Shudo. 4. Bakugo Katsuki. Sighing, Izuku looked at his fellow students and tried to find whoever those three were. Who had done the best? Izuku tried to remember the higher scores in each test. The Creation Girl did really well. She looked smug, so that was probably Yaoyorozu. Explosion Boy had used his quirk extremely well, and he was looking between Izuku and the Fire/Ice Boy with pure hatred. He was probably Bakugo, which meant Fire/Ice Boy, who had done exceptionally well with his stunning quirk, was Todoroki. Finally, a name for the powerful person he planned to absolutely destroy. Thank God. Shinso breathed out. Confused, Izuku glanced back at the board to see Shinso had gotten second to last. Still, Izuku was confused. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion. Eraser drawled, and then a manic and toothy grin broke out across his face. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. But you couldn't have expelled anyone anyway. Izuku frowned. The students who had started yelling or letting out exclamations of surprise all quieted to stare, and Aizawa narrowed his eyes. You said you'd expel whoever came last in every test. I placed last in the standing long jump, which means no one could get last in every test because I took a spot. Every member of the class whipped their hands back to Eraser, who was sighing. Izuku grinned. With that, we're done here. Eraser said, not even denying it. He then started walking away. There are handouts with the curriculum and such in the classroom, so when you get back, look at them. Is that why you threw that one test? Shinso demanded, turning to Izuku. Half the class seemed to want to know the same, so Izuku just grinned. We should get back to the classroom. Izuku answered. I'd like a syllabus. Wouldn't you? He then turned and headed for the classroom, leaving his classmates to stew in confusion. Izuku knew the truth, though, and he really did just hate sand. Chapter 6. Battle Trials. Izuku wanted to bang his head against a wall, but he settled on keeping a paper airplane airborne for as long as he could. Luckily for him, that meant he could literally just sit there and focus on his airplane indefinitely. Not so lucky. His teachers seemed to believe he couldn't do multiple things at once and kept trying to catch him off guard. Midoriya, can you answer the question on the board? Present Mike asked, gesturing to the barrage of sentences on the chalkboard. Which one of these sentences is wrong? It's number 4, Izuku said, flicking his plane back up as it dipped over the girl with the hearing mutation quirk. And why do you think that? Mike asked as a follow-up. Because putting that wherever you want in the smack dab middle of a sentence doesn't work, Izuku replied, pushing the plane out of the back corner. It should be used at the end, referring to the object of the sentence. Then his plane flew over Todoroki, which meant Todoroki glanced up and his eyes followed the plane for a moment before he refocused on Mike. Correct, Mike announced with a reluctant thumbs up. Izuku just sighed as Mike moved on, and he continued playing with his airplane. Honestly, even that got boring after a while. Izuku was thinking of using the next class period to hit different people with his airplanes to see who could ignore him the best. But then the door slid open and Izuku's least favorite hero appeared in the doorway. I am coming through the door like a normal person. All Might hung off the door frame for a dramatic moment as the class gasped in apparent excitement. It's All Might, the electric user whispered with awe. Wow, he really is a teacher here, Kirishima yelled with a happy grin. That's a costume from the Silver Age, isn't it? The frog girl asked as All Might strode for the podium at the front of the room. Its style is so different, Tail Boy said in response to Frog Girl. It's giving me goosebumps. Kill me now, Izuku sighed, dropping his head on his desk with a thud. Izuku was ignored as All Might started speaking with that stupidly proud voice and his hands on his hips. I teach hero basic training. It's a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basics of becoming a hero. Well, obviously, All Might's brains would get better use if Izuku plastered them all over a sidewalk. You'll take the most units of this subject. Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today. All Might dramatically held up a card and yelled, Combat training. Combat. Bakugo yelled. Izuku couldn't see his face, but somehow he knew the boy was grinning. And to go with that are these. Like all things he did, All Might dramatically gestured to the wall as cubbies slowly ejected themselves from said wall. Costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started. After you change, gather in ground beta. Hi, the class chorused, and then they all jumped to their feet and practically ran for their costume cases. Izuku snagged his case once the rush was over, and he felt vaguely like throwing up at the thought of wearing an actual hero costume. Worst of all, his dad had designed it and hadn't showed him. Izuku had absolutely no idea what it looked like, and the thought was terrifying. This material is more comfortable than I thought it would be, Shinso said conversationally as he examined his own costume. Izuku was mainly ignoring Shinso as he tried not to blatantly glare at his case while opening it. Holy shit, Izuku exclaimed as he pulled out the costume. It was literally skin-tight, designed to be like a second skin. The fabric was stretchy, so it would probably be easy to get on, but Izuku hated tight clothing. Was this torture part of the punishment? That looks cool, man. Kirishima grinned as he glanced at the costume Izuku was just holding in his hands and staring at. So manly. Izuku didn't respond, wrinkling his nose and remaining silent. He was a good actor, but not that good. The skin-tight suit was charcoal black, and it had small yet visible hexagons on the fabric as a sort of fashionable texture. It fully covered him, turtleneck to toes, with the exception of his fingertips. It even had feet attached. Izuku shuddered as he put it on. The saving grace of the horrid bodysuit were the accessories. Izuku was given black knee boots that were a deeper and darker shade of black, along with a cropped jacket in the same void-like shade. He also had a belt with lots of pouches, but it was a bright snow-colored white. Finally was the odd headpiece. It was like a sort of circlet. It was a metal band that went around his head and had a V-shaped over his forehead with an emerald-colored jewel on it that hung down on his forehead. It seemed to be designed with curly hair in mind, so his fluffy curls covered the band in the back. Basically, yeah, it was a fancy and useless circlet. Why was that a part of his costume? Naturally, Izuku hated all of it and wanted to take the whole costume off. Izuku fidgeted with the long sleeves of his cropped jacket as he exited the tunnel, unsure why it was even there when it was open in the front with no buttons or zipper. Izuku then blinked harshly as he exited the tunnel and stepped into bright sunlight. "Well, you look fantastic," Shinso drawled once Izuku had stopped squinting into the light and joined the group. "Did you take so long because you were checking yourself in the mirror?" "No, it's because I absolutely despise skin-tight clothing." Izuku scowled. "I don't like it." "Ah, same here." Izuku turned to face the person who spoke and realized it was Gravity Girl. "I should have been more specific on my form. Mine ended up being a skin-tight bodysuit too. Hers was mainly black, but it had white sections down her torso and on her biceps decorated with pink accents here and there. She also had a belt, but it seemed purely aesthetic because it framed her hips and made her waist look smaller." "Why did you ask for it then?" Shinso raised an eyebrow at both of them. "I didn't," Izuku snapped. "My brother designed it." Not exactly true, but close enough. He couldn't exactly said it was his dad, since his dad had supposedly abandoned him. "I just should have written what I wanted more specifically." The girl smiled awkwardly. "It's so embarrassing." "I'm not embarrassed." Izuku frowned. "I'm uncomfortable. My brother did this on purpose, and this is sabotage." Izuku wished that was the truth, because if it really had been Tamura's fault, then Izuku would be allowed to complain and find a way to retaliate. But since it was part of his punishment from his dad, Izuku was stuck being uncomfortable and didn't have a choice. "Now, it's time for combat training," All Might declared. Speed Boy's hand was in the air immediately. "Sir, this is a battle center from the entrance exam, so we will be conducting urban battles again." "No, we're going to move ahead by 2 steps." All Might announced like skipping important steps was perfectly normal. Most of the time, fighting villains takes place outside, but if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate. Imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. For this class, you'll be split into villains and heroes and fight 2 battles indoors. Without basic training. Frog Mutation Girl asked. "I second that question," Izuku called. "This is a real battle, to understand those basics," All Might explained, further proving his idiocy. However, the key this time is the fact that there's no robot you can just beat up. "How will wins and losses be determined?" Yaoyorozu asked in her monstrosity of a costume. Then questions continued rapid fire, and Izuku couldn't keep up with who was saying what. "Can we beat them up anyway? Will the punishment be expulsion like with Aizawa-sensei? How shall we be split up? Isn't this cape crazy?" I'll answer all your questions," All Might declared. Pulling out a tiny book, no doubt some kind of lesson plan, All Might started reading. "Now listen here. The situation is that the villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in their hideout. The heroes are trying to dispose of that. The heroes need to catch the villains or get the nuclear weapon back in the allotted time. The villains need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time or catch the heroes." All Might put away the book and held up a box that simply said lots. "Teams and opponents will be determined by drawing lots." "They're being determined so haphazardly?" Speed Boy exclaimed. He sounded a little affronted, and Izuku rolled his eyes. "Heroes team up with other agencies or other heroes nearby if they need help," Izuku answered when no one else did. "That's how I think this exercise is set up, but All Might could have done it accidentally. He knows absolutely jack shit about team-ups." "Midoriya," Speed Boy gasped, turning to frantically chop a hand in his direction. "You should not." "I couldn't care less about offending All Might even if the world ended," Izuku snapped. "I'm not going to hide my distaste for him just because he's our teacher." The boy seemed stunned to silence, and All Might cleared his throat. "It's fine. Now let's do this quickly." All Might held up the box, and Izuku was the first one to step forward because the rest of the class was apparently too stunned by Izuku's previous comment to move. They did move eventually, though, which was sad. Izuku was sort of hoping one of them would die on the spot. Now that would be interesting. "Team A, Todoroki and Midoriya. Team B, Uraraka and Shuji. Team C, Yaoyorozu and Shinso. Team D, Bakugo and Ida. Team E, Ashido and Aoyama. Team F, Kota and Satu. Team G, Kaminari and Jairu. Team H, Tokoyami and Azui. Team I, Ajiru and Hagakure. Team J, Shiro and Kirishima. Izuku immediately headed for Todoroki, who eyed him with mild suspicion and curiosity. Midoriya. Izuku held out a hand. Todoroki looked at him a little blankly, his red hair and blue eye completely covered by fake ice. Todoroki Shudo, he replied, and fuck, his voice was as cold as his quirk. Todoroki reached out and shook his hand. Izuku froze minutely when their hands touched, and he even stopped breathing. Todoroki's right hand was cold to the touch, and it made Izuku's blood thrum with excitement. Steel wasn't even active, but Izuku could feel it under his skin begging to be able to let out and reach for Todoroki's quirk. Not yet. Izuku took a deep breath. I will ruin you, Todoroki Shudo. Just you wait. One day, when you least expect it. It was only a moment before Todoroki released his hand, and then Izuku could breathe again. He inhaled sharply and yanked his thoughts back to the present, then turned to face All Might. The worthless excuse of a hero had one hand in a box labeled villains and his other hand in a box labeled heroes. The first teams to fight will be these guys. Izuku blinked owlishly at the black ball with a white A on it. Team D will be the heroes, and Team A will be the villains. Everyone else, head to the monitor room. Hi. The class chimed. Todoroki remained silent at Izuku's side, and they both followed All Might to a building with Bakugo and Speed Boy, whose name was apparently Ida. Villain team, go in first and set up. All Might declared. In 5 minutes the hero team will break in, and the battle will start. Yes, sir, Ida yelled, and then he staring at his map like it would speak to him. Young Todoroki, young Midoriya, All Might said as Izuku started to head inside. Try to think from the perspective of the villains. This is pretty close to a real battle. Go all out. Don't be afraid to get hurt. You shouldn't be encouraging children to maim each other just because we have Recovery Girl on staff. Izuku said blandly. Not a very good teacher, are you? Huh. I wonder if there's even a single thing you're good at. You're a pretty shitty excuse of a hero too. Izuku stalked inside and ignored the sputtering coughs All Might let out behind him. Izuku did relax a little at Todoroki's quiet footsteps following him. Where do you want to put the bomb? Izuku asked, eyeing the massive bomb-shaped object in the middle of the hallway. It doesn't really matter, Todoroki said quietly. Despite the low volume, his voice was firm and bland. I can ice off the whole building for the duration of the battle. Bakugo has an explosion quirk. Izuku hummed. He might break through, but that wouldn't be much of a problem anyway. You could just replace the ice, or I could just push him away. What is your quirk? Todoroki asked blankly. Izuku did not think about the frozen intensity in Todoroki's eyes. He really didn't. It's called push and pull. Izuku answered, activating quirk immune out of habit. I can attract or repel things using my hands. Todoroki narrowed his eyes, but nodded in acceptance. So where would you put the bomb? Todoroki prompted. Probably the 3rd floor. Izuku hummed. If you completely freeze the floors below us, they'll have so much ice to get through that they might never reach us. Any higher than the 3rd floor, and you might risk freezing to death. I could freeze this whole building and have no problems, Todoroki said, ice in his tone. Izuku ignored the way his quirk thrummed at the tone. I don't doubt it, Izuku replied. But if we're going with my plan, you wouldn't be freezing the building and making the floors a little slick. You'd be filling each and every hallway and room from top to bottom on the 1st and 2nd floors. That's a lot more ice. Todoroki stared at him scrutinizingly, and Izuku stared back. His eyes were so pretty, and Izuku could imagine the feel of his quirk behind those eyes. Endless ice and fire with no need for breaks because of the perfect balance and achievable homeostasis at his fingertips. All right, Todoroki said, breaking the silence. Izuku resisted snapping his quirk out at his partner when Todoroki ended their little staring contest. Todoroki headed for the door that All Might had presumably closed once they'd both entered the building. Take the bomb to the third floor. I'll find you. Izuku watched as Todoroki's fingertips ran down the wall as he walked, and ice spread wherever he touched. Streaks of ice formed under his right foot, and Izuku turned away as Todoroki started shooting ice in thick layers and completely covered the door in ice. Climbing the stairs and choosing a random room on the third floor, Izuku plopped the bomb on the floor, sat down, shut his eyes, and activated Steel. Ignoring engine and explosions outside, Steel immediately honed in on Todoroki. Steel reached out for the bright light in Izuku's vision, wrapping around it and wishing it could yank the beautiful quirk away. Todoroki's fingers would be useless, no longer burning and freezing, and his eyes would no longer hold such sharp beauty. He would be utterly ruined and destroyed just like Izuku wanted him to be. Todoroki would be lifeless and empty, but Izuku wouldn't be. Izuku would have that power. He would breathe out frost and steam, flames licking up his left side as ice crawled down his right. He would burn someone alive while their feet were iced to the spot. Izuku would be able to freeze someone's body and make little concentrated flames melt their fingers. Steel caressed Todoroki's quirk, skimming over it and feeling the way it shifted under the boy's skin as he froze himself from the inside out, while his left side warmed the smallest bit to keep him alive. Such wasted potential. Such a beautiful talent and power, stifled by a boy who could never appreciate the beauty of a gift like that. Izuku opened his eyes and shut off Steel, gasping slightly as his quirk crashed back into him and fought being deactivated like it used to do when he was a child, back when he couldn't control it. Izuku took a deep breath to calm himself as Todoroki's footsteps approached and composed himself. Done then, Izuku said as steadily as he could when Todoroki appeared in the doorway. Yes, Todoroki confirmed. I told you I could do it. I never doubted you. Izuku replied, trying to rein in his anguished awe. Todoroki just nodded. Now, let's start the person-to-person combat training with Team A and Team D. All Might's voice boomed through their earpieces. The announcement was immediately followed by ear-splitting explosions and the sound of shattering ice. Do you want to protect the door, or should I? Izuku asked. You can do it. Todoroki said blandly. I froze the bottom floors just like you said, so it's unlikely they'll reach us anyway. We'll see. Izuku pushed to his feet and stumbled a little, but he headed for the door and chose to lean on the wall in the hallway just outside their bomb room. Izuku could see the stairs, and there was a wall of ice covering the doorway. Minutes went by where Todoroki stood by the bomb while Izuku leaned against the hallway wall, and Izuku quickly became bored. Izuku walked towards the ice wall that covered the staircase up to them, and he used pull to wrench a piece out. He grinned at the chunk of ice, and he retreated back to his wall so he could toss the ball up and use push to zoom it around the room. Leaning against the wall, Izuku spent the next several minutes watching the ice spin above his head, catching sunlight and making shadows dance as the ice shone. Such a pretty quirk. Much better than Shinsu's, he decided. Better than separate, better than Izuku's favorite quirk, Bloom. It allowed him to turn drops of blood into flowers, even blood inside people. It tasted like rust and wind and leaves, and it crept up his fingers like they were slick with blood. But this, ice/fire was better. Finally, the explosions they'd been hearing the entire match grew close enough for Izuku to straighten, and then he caught sight of fire and smoke beyond the ice. Soon enough, the ice covering the doorway exploded inwards, and Izuku shoved Bakugo backwards and sent him toppling down the stairs. Swearing and yelling ensued, swearing mainly from Bakugo and yelling mainly from Ida, and Izuku grinned upon hearing both. Then they were back, and Izuku shoved them right back down the stairs. Die! Bakugo screamed as he reappeared, and Izuku's eyes widened as the bomb gauntlet pointed right at him, and All Might's voice shrieking in his ear. No, stop. You'll kill him. I won't kill him if he dodges. Bakugo cackled, and Izuku immediately dove for the doorway of the bomb room as Bakugo pulled a pin. Bakugo's gauntlet exploded and Izuku was hit with the very edge of it. He made it away from the main blast, but explosions were dangerous even if they grazed you. Motherfucker! Izuku yelled as he came out of his roll a few feet inside the bomb room. That was uncalled for. The back of his costume was smoking, but his jacket had taken the worst of it. Bakugo had blown a hole through the entire building. The hallway Izuku had been standing in didn't even exist anymore. Todoroki froze the doorway off as soon as Izuku was inside the bomb room. And so Izuku took the time to brush off his costume and put out the small patches of his costume that were singed or actually on fire. You can't hide from me. Bakugo, All Might said not to use that again indoors. He'll disqualify you. I'm not Four Eyes, shut up. The ice exploded inwards, sending shards everywhere, but it was a normal explosion instead of whatever the fuck had happened in the hallway. Izuku flicked Bakugo away hard, and he slammed into the far wall of the hallway outside. Izuku then continued pushing until Bakugo couldn't move under the sheer amount of pressure Izuku was putting on him. When Ida tried to zoom through the doorway, Izuku pulled him inside the room and then pushed him into a wall. Todoroki, can you freeze him there? Izuku hadn't even finished speaking before Ida was neck-deep in ice and thoroughly attached to the wall. Thanks. Todoroki just nodded. His eyes seemed to be glancing between Bakugo struggling weakly against a wall and Izuku's outstretched hand. Todoroki politely did not interfere, but was paying close attention so he could freeze Bakugo if he needed to. He didn't. Time's up, All Might declared, voice ringing in all their ears. Villain team wins. Izuku dropped Bakugo promptly, and the blonde fell onto his hands and knees gasping for breath. Similarly, Todoroki promptly stepped towards Ida and pressed his left hand to the frozen boy's chest. Todoroki narrowed his eyes, and then Ida gasped as steam rose and all the ice melted off him. Soon the floor was soaked with hot water and Ida was free. Steam filled the building, and Izuku could feel the heat coming off the floor and walls. Todoroki had unfrozen the entire building, melting all the ice inside with that one hand. Izuku inhaled sharply, watching Todoroki glare and grit his teeth. Why did he hate to use such a gift? How dare he be so ungrateful for such a wonderful power? Then Todoroki was stepping away from Ida and stalking out of the room. Izuku slowly followed him with his heart beating nearly out of his chest, and he paid no attention to the trembling blonde on his hands and knees in the hallway. What wasted potential was all Izuku could think for the rest of the day. Chapter 7. Class Representative. Izuku ran an exhausted hand through his hair and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He had little bruises under his eyes, evidence of spending the weekend night out late doing very villainous activities. Izuku, Inko called, you'll miss the train. Maybe I want to miss the train, Izuku muttered. Hefting his backpack over one shoulder, Izuku left his room to kiss his mother's cheek and say goodbye. Have a great day today. She smiled at him. Be good, have fun, and don't get caught killing All Might. I wouldn't get caught. Izuku huffed, and he looked around briefly before frowning. Where's Tamura? With your father. Inko sighed fondly. They're doing some underworld planning stuff today. Ah, of course. Izuku rolled his eyes. Bye, Mama. She waved at him as he slipped out the door and headed for the train station. Izuku, upon arriving at UA, debated turning his ass right back around and going home. Unfortunately, his dad would be disappointed in him if he did that. But his dad wasn't home. No, Izuku would be yelled at when his dad did get home. On top of that, Tamura would definitely make fun of him for chickening out over something as stupid as the press. Actually, no, the press was terrifying. With a deep breath, Izuku marched to the front door and tried to keep his eyes on the school as he passed through the sea of reporters. They didn't seem to get the memo or vibe of his attitude. You, a brown-haired lady yelled, shoving a microphone in his face. What kind of a teacher is All Might? Have you had a class with him? Can you confirm he's a heroics teacher? I only have one thing to say. Izuku looked right at the camera and leaned into the microphone. All Might sucks. The reporters, who'd calmed a little when he appeared to be making a statement, immediately exploded with noise. Ignoring them completely, Izuku turned away and walked past the barrier without delay. Good work on yesterday's battle training. I saw the video and the results. Aizawa sighed tiredly. Bakugo, you're talented, so don't act like a kid. TCH. I know, Bakugo said, looking away with a mild scowl. Now, Let's get down to homeroom business. Sorry about the late notice, but today I'll have you. Aizawa paused, either purposefully or to check his notes, and then sighed again. Decide on a class representative. I want to be class rep, pick me. Kirishima said immediately, standing up and slamming a hand on his desk. Me too, the electric user said. Was his name Kaminari? I want to do it too. Hearing Quirk raised an enthusiastic hand. It's a job made for me, the one with the laser quirk said, winking. I'll be the leader, the acid one said, jumping in front of Sparkles and interrupting him. Let me do it. Me. Bakuga screamed. God, will this torture ever end? Izuku groaned, dropping his head on his desk. If they didn't shut up, he was going to risk his dad's wrath and murder someone. Silence, please. The boy Izuku had fought, Ida, called everyone's attention loudly. It is a job with the serious responsibility of leading others. It is not a job for just anyone who wants to do it. It is a calling that requires the trust of those around you. If we want to use democracy to decide on a true leader, then we should hold an election to choose one. Despite his words, Ida's hand was rammed straight up in a way that suggested he desperately wanted the position. Why did you suggest that? The electric user frowned. We haven't known each other for that long. Frog Mutation said. So how can we have trust or anything? If that's the case, and everyone votes for themselves. Kirishima trailed off thoughtfully, and Izuku again resisted banging his head on his desk. Don't you think that's precisely why whoever receives multiple votes here can be truly considered the most suitable person? Ida declared, becoming a robot and chopping the air. What do you think, Aizawa-sensei? Their teacher was hiding in his yellow monstrosity of a sleeping bag again. I don't care as long as you decide by the end of homeroom. Aizawa slid down and flopped onto the floor. The class blinked at him. Thank you very much, Ida said finally, and then Izuku was subjected to the chaos that was 19 hero students trying to vote. Izuku didn't count himself as the 20th because he wasn't really a hero student. He did vote though. When the votes were tallied and displayed on the chalkboard for all to see, Izuku did bang his head against his desk. Why me? Izuku groaned, and then stood swiftly and headed for the podium. Creation Girl, Yaoyorozu, was apparently his deputy, seeing as he was the main class representative by order of his 3 votes. Then, the class rep is Midoriya, and the deputy class rep will be Yaoyorozu. Aizawa said this tiredly, and then he was flopping back down onto the floor. Izuku was starting to wonder if Aizawa patrolled literally all night and played with the idea that he himself, as drop-off, was part of the reason Eraserhead was so tired. The thought appealed to him greatly. Thanks for your votes. Izuku grinned. This should be rather interesting. Despite shuddering at the thought of being a leader for the hero kids, it was beyond funny they thought he was the perfect example of a model heroic student. It couldn't have been further from the truth. We'll do our best, Yaoyorozu said politely, bowing a little. Izuku copied her, albeit a bit sarcastically, and grinned at the class. That might not be so bad. Frog Mutation croaked. After all said and done, Midoriya can get pretty fired up, Kirishima said brightly. And Yaoyorozu was cool when we were going over the battle results. Tape Boy grinned. They were all dismissed for lunch, and Izuku headed to the lunchroom promptly. Unfortunately, that meant his 2 tag-alongs followed him like he was the leader of their little trio. It was annoying, but it did mean Shinso would be nearby when Izuku was eventually given permission to steal his quirk. Izuku would probably steal Kirishima's too, since he was now apparently one of Izuku's followers, but his wasn't a priority. It was still a bit boring. Who'd you vote for? Kirishima asked as they 3 plopped down at a table. Ida. Izuku shrugged. He got everyone to shut up, and I was down for that. I can see that. Kirishima nodded happily. I voted for you, man. You were so manly when you tossed Bakugo around yesterday. I did too, Shinso grinned, but only because I knew you'd never vote for yourself. Smug idiot, Izuku muttered, which made Shinsu's toothy grin widen. Moving on, what does a class rep do anyway? Oh, it's their responsibility to advocate for the class and keep everyone in line. Kirishima explained, grinning cheerfully. It's a leadership position, and you're basically a role model for all of us. Interesting, Izuku hummed. Do you think if I bash All Might people will follow suit? Shinso choked on his water, and Kirishima looked briefly confused. Before Izuku could get a proper response, there was a loud voice ringing through the lunchroom. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate outdoors promptly. Izuku blinked and narrowed his eyes. A breach? I repeat, there has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate outdoors promptly. Boy, come on. Kirishima jumped to his feet and beckoned them. Shinsage looked slightly frozen, eyes wide, so Izuku impatiently grabbed his arm and pulled him to his feet so they could leave the lunchroom. That's when things got hectic. Izuku was promptly shoved into the person in front of him, and he found he was suddenly in a sea of bodies. There were people all around him, and he did not appreciate the elbows and knees and arms hitting him every which way, but he reached his wit's end when some random guy grabbed him by the waist as a sort of anchor, so as not to be jostled so badly. Not okay, dude. Stop. Izuku pushed everyone away, shoving people against the walls and even propelling some people into the air. He glared around at them, grateful for the brief stunned silence and the wide 3-foot radius of empty space surrounding him he'd cleared. Didn't you hear the announcement? It said to evacuate outdoors promptly. How the fuck are we meant to do that if you're panicking and crowding the exits like this? People were squirming under the force of his quirk, but they all seemed to be processing his words properly. Then Izuku glanced over when someone gasped. It's just the press. Someone yelled, pointing out the window with an arm Izuku apparently didn't have pinned. The police are here. As students slowly started calming down, Izuku let up the pressure on the students he'd pinned to the walls and pulled the students still up in the air down to him safely. He caught them one by the waist and lowered them to the floor. They were shaken, but some of them thanked him or apologized sheepishly. Izuku smiled at them, even as he felt a twinge of annoyance at their stupidity. Boy, that was so manly. Kirishima ran up to Izuku with a wide grin. You had everyone under control in just a few seconds. We all have our things. Izuku shrugged, and Kirishima nodded cheerfully in understanding. Did you have to slam everyone into the wall so hard? Shinso groaned, rubbing his arm ruefully as he joined them as everyone started to evacuate properly. Yes, Izuku said simply. They wouldn't have listened to me otherwise. If you say so. Shinso sighed. What do you think that was all about? The panic. The breach. Reporters, the press. Izuku shrugged. Did you see how they were assaulting people at the gate this morning? They were desperate beyond measure. True. Shinso frowned, and then he jumped in surprise when Kirishima clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry so much, Shinso, Kirishima said brightly. Aizawa-sensei and the other teachers will definitely figure it out. Right. Shinso was eyeing Kirishima warily, and it made Izuku laugh. It was beyond funny to see Kirishima be completely oblivious to Shinsu's disdainful distrust, and Izuku wondered if they'd slowly become real friends. That'd be funny as hell to watch, honestly. Shinso would definitely be against it at first, when he noticed they were edging towards friendship, but he'd cave to the sunshine. Everyone caved to a pretty smile and encouraging words, and it would be so much more fun to kill them if they cared about each other. Maybe he'd make one of them watch as he turned the other inside out. Chapter 8, USJ Part 1. Mornings did not agree with Izuku, and it was made abundantly clear once again when Izuku got up for school. Stumbling his way out of his room, Izuku caught sight of his equally not a morning person brother. Morning, Tomura grumbled, and Izuku returned the greeting with a small yawn. What have you and Dad been working on? Izuku asked tiredly, rubbing his eyes as he and Tomura both went into the bathroom to brush their teeth at the same time. None of your business. Tomura mumbled, more asleep than awake. Izuku had to take the toothpaste away from him when he just continued squirting it all over the counter. His brother gave him a dirty look for it. Fine, fine. Izuku sighed, and he went about brushing his teeth as normal. Tomura slowly became more awake, and Izuku repeated his question when they both sat down for breakfast with their mother. Some of Doctor's experiments are coming along nicely, Tomura said, giving Izuku a better answer now that he wasn't as tired. Son, ahem, Dad has been letting me see the facility more often. Ew. Izuku wrinkled his nose, and Tamura snorted. That's why I didn't invite you, jerk. Hey, I was just curious. Don't pry so much. I do not pry. Boys, Inko interrupted with a sigh. They both gave a chastised look before glaring at one another and finishing their breakfast. Izuku was finally ready to leave, saying goodbye to his mother, when Tamura threw something at him. Here, he called, and Izuku barely managed to catch it away from his face with so little warning. Tamura, Izuku complained while his brother laughed, and his mother covered a snort. Dang, I was hoping to get you in the face. Jerk, you aimed at my face on purpose. Dearest brother, I have cured your boredom, and this is how you repay me? Tamura turned away with a fully offended expression. For shame, Izuku, for shame. Ha ha, very funny. Izuku said sarcastically as he rolled his eyes. Then he fully examined what his brother had chucked at his head. It was a Rubik's Cube. You didn't. Izuku gasped, spinning one of the rows a few times to move the brightly colored blocks around. I most certainly did. Tamura grinned. I hope you find it entertaining. Something in Tamura's expression was layered with older brother mischievous intent, which didn't bode well. That wasn't suspicious at all. Izuku narrowed his eyes. If it explodes, I'm telling Dad. I wouldn't send you to school with a bomb. Tamura rolled his eyes. Besides, Mother would kill me. Yes, I would. Inko eyed him for a moment, but then she turned and smiled at Izuku. Go on, you'll be late. You always say that, and I'm never late. Izuku huffed. That's because I tell you that before you're late. Inko laughed. Now, off with you. Bye, Mama. Mura. Izuku grinned, and then he was off. The first thing Izuku noticed before basic hero training, gross, was that Aizawa actually seemed to be awake when he moved to stand at the podium. For today's hero basic training, it's turned into a class with 3 instructors, All Might and me, and 1 more person. Aizawa announced. Oi! Someone threw their hand up in the air. It was Tape Boy. Izuku remembered from the battle trails that his name was Siro. What'll we be doing? He wasn't even finished asking before Aizawa held up a card labeled Rescue in blue font. Disasters, shipwrecks, and everything in between. Aizawa said, it's rescue training. Rescue. Kaminari, the one who sucked at using his awesome electricity quirk, said it with an odd inflection. Looks like this'll be a lot of work, too. Right? Acid Girl, Ashido, agreed readily, bouncing in her seat. Idiots, this is the duty of a hero. Kirishima cut in, as sunshine as ever. My arms are ready to rumble. No one can beat me in the water, Kero Kero. Izuku was a little weirded out by the noises the frog girl made, and resolved to kill her one day. Maybe he'd take her quirk just so he could watch her body slowly fall apart at the seams until there was nothing recognizable left as he tore the mutation out of her body. No. Bad Izuku, no murder at school. Hey, I'm not done. Aizawa grunted. The irony of just how done he really wasn't lost to Izuku. You can decide if you want to wear your costume or not this time. With the press of a button, the monstrous costume case cubbies came open and Izuku resisted a shudder. Because there are probably costumes that limit your abilities, too. The training will take place off campus, so we're taking a bus. That is all. Start getting ready. Hi. The class chorused, and they all stood to retrieve their costumes. Aren't you grabbing your costume? Kirishima asked excitedly when Izuku made for the door without it. It was so cool, man. It suits you. Izuku was tempted to kill him just for that comment. Fine, Izuku muttered, then pulled the case off the rack and into his hand. Kirishima grinned happily. Izuku ended up on the bus between Kirishima and Shinso, which really was the best outcome compared to his other choices. At least this way, he wasn't tempted to murder anyone more than usual. He was used to them by now, which was a horrifying thought. The bus ride seemed to take forever, and Izuku was forced to chat pleasantly with his classmates as they all gushed over each other's quirks. Eventually, it got around to him. The way you anchored yourself to me back at the quirk assessment was awesome. Kirishima grinned. How'd you do that anyway? Gravity user, Uraraka, asked as she tilted her head. My quirk, push and pull, is centered in my hands. Izuku lied, clicking on quirk immune habitually. When I use pull on something heavy or sturdy, I can either focus on pulling myself to it, or it to me. It's not hard. That's so cool. Ashido squealed, and Izuku nodded along as the conversation moved on to other classmates. He was more than glad to unload when the bus finally rolled to a stop. When 13 appeared, Izuku pulled out his Rubik's Cube so he wouldn't be tempted to steal her quirk, Black Hole, immediately. The thought of having such a destructive and beautiful power literally at his fingertips, too seductive. As such, Izuku wasn't all that interested in what 13 was saying while he played with his Rubik's Cube. He spun the rows and clicked them to different positions. Usually he was good at solving puzzles, but it just wasn't working. Something about it was off, ever so slightly. Why couldn't he get all the colors to work? It was like someone fucked it up on purpose. Wait a minute. With narrowed and suspicious eyes, Izuku counted each square and found that he didn't have enough reds, and he had extras of blue. Tamura, why would he murder Izuku like that? What was Izuku supposed to do now? Suddenly the lights went out, and Izuku looked up in confusion. That probably wasn't a good sign, but was definitely interesting. Izuku watched Aizawa tense and then whip around, and Izuku followed his line of sight to see Kurogiri's warp. Ominously, a single pale hand reached from the portal and a person stepped out. Izuku couldn't see very well, but the mop of blue hair was almost definitely his idiotic and slightly murderous older brother. He was covered in hands. Izuku also frowned at the hulking purple monster that stepped out beside Tamura. It looked dead, brain halfway falling out with blank eyes, but it was standing and Izuku didn't really like that. Probably one of Doctor's experiments that Tamura got to play with. Izuku sighed heavily, even as his classmates seemed to recoil as a mass of villains stepped through after his brother. Interestingly, most of them had mutation quirks. That meant Tamura was planning on trying to take down Eraser. But why? What was the point? Izuku hadn't heard anything about a raid on UA, so he just sighed in resignation at being left out of Tamura's plans. Downsides of being the youngest and not liking Doctor very much. Don't move, Eraser yelled, probably in response to one of the babblings of Izuku's classmates. Those are villains. Nice job, Officer Fuckface. You really connected the dots on that one. 13 and Eraserhead. Interesting that All Might is missing, don't you think? Tamura's voice rang through the USJ ominously. It made Izuku blink in surprise, because his brother never spoke like that. Tamura was all wild and teasing, and down in the plaza he was speaking softly, menacingly. Was he just here for fun then? To throw everyone off and get attention? Honestly, yeah, that sounded like Tamura. So you scumbags were the ones responsible for the trespassing yesterday? Eraser accused, taking a single step forward. Obviously, your defenses really need an upgrade, Eraserhead. Tamura seemed to be grinning, and it made Izuku sigh again. Anyway, we're here to cause trouble. How will you handle us? Oh, great teachers, pro heroes of UA. Yep, called it. Tamura broke into UA for attention. Figures. Villains, no way, Kirishima exclaimed. There's no way they could break into a hero school. They sort of just did. Izuku deadpanned. Sensei, what about the trespasser sensors? Yaoyorozu stepped forward, and 13 glanced backwards at her. We have them, of course, but did they only appear here, or around the whole school? Izuku turned immediately at the sound of Todoroki's soft voice. Either way, if the sensors are not responding, that means they have someone with a quirk that can do that. An isolated area separated from the main campus, during the time when a class is supposed to be here. They might be fools, but they're not dumb. This surprise attack was carefully planned with some sort of goal in mind. Everyone was stunned into silence, and Izuku sighed. Wow, he breathed, not taking his eyes off Todoroki. Izuku couldn't wait to take that beauty and destroy it, leaving Todoroki with nothing but emptiness. What? Shinso hissed. Did you even hear him? Izuku asked, not even glancing at Shinso. He's so cool. Don't tell me you want to befriend him. Shinso recoiled. You said you don't do friends. If you want to call it that, then sure, yes, I want him to be my friend. Izuku shrugged. Congratulations, you're my first friend. I already said you were stuck with me on, like, day one. Despite the circumstances that were absolutely terrible, of course, villains, oh no. Shinso beamed in excitement at him. Did people really care about being friends that much? That was hilarious, especially because it wasn't even real friendship. Izuku wanted Shinso around for his quirk, and Izuku wanted around Todoroki because of his quirk. Shinso belonged to Izuku, and Todoroki would be Izuku's greatest masterpiece when he was done with him. Apparently, during their little conversation, Eraserhead had said something to 13 and the class, so they were suddenly supposed to be running away. Of course, little hero students get traumatized by villains, run away. Izuku jogged with the class, Shinso seemingly sticking with him by sheer determination, and then Kurogiri was abruptly and directly between the class and the door. Well, good luck, hero students. You're fucked. I won't let you get away. Kurogiri produced his yellow eyes in the looming mist. Nice to meet you. We are the League of Villains. Izuku thought that was a horribly dumb name, and he was definitely teasing Tamura about it later. It may be presumptuous of us, but we invited ourselves into the home of the heroes, UA High School, to meet everyone. 13 put an arm out, as if she could even remotely protect the students, and glared at Kurogiri. She was wrong, of course, but Izuku was polite enough not to outright laugh. I believe All Might should have been here. Has there been some kind of change? Kurogiri expanded his mist, looking sort of like a bird of prey out to get them. Well, that is irrelevant. This is the part 1M to play. Everything about Tamura was games, and Izuku just sighed at the inevitability that he was about to be tossed somewhere random and have to beat up his brother's goons. Oh no, what a shame. He blinked in genuine surprise as Bakugo and Kirishima both leapt forward to try and get Kurogiri, only to fail spectacularly. Izuku sighed as Kirishima taunted Kurogiri. Oh yeah, A+ little hero student. Antagonistic behavior really was the way to go. Not that Izuku could really talk, being the antagonistic little shit he was, but he wasn't a real heroic student, so Izuku could do whatever he wanted. Oh dear, that's dangerous. Izuku choked at the sarcasm from Kurogiri, and he had to wave off a bizarre look from Shinso because of it. That's right. Even if you are just students, you are excellent golden eggs. Mist surrounded them, blocking their vision and consuming them all, and Izuku didn't even try to fight it as his classmates screamed. My job is to scatter you all, so have fun, little heralings. Izuku was spat out at least a dozen feet above a massive expanse of water, and he shrieked in surprise as he slammed into it full force. That was just rude. Izuku was so burning Kurogiri's tea supply when he got home. He looked around under the water and glared as a shark-like villain swam directly for him. Izuku pushed him away, and he went staggering backwards a little. Apparently, push and pull didn't work very well in the water, so Izuku twisted around and started swimming away with perfect and clean strokes. Bubbles from a cry of surprise left his mouth as something wet and round wrapped around his torso, and Izuku found himself very suddenly being dragged along behind something. Reaching out with steel, he realized it was just Frog Girl. He forced himself to relax, even though he was mildly internally panicking. He was only allowed to use push and pull at school, so he might genuinely not be able to beat the Frog Girl in the water. It didn't really matter because they were supposedly on the same side, but it was a terrifying thought nonetheless. She gently placed him on the deck of a boat, which he assumed to be in the center of the water zone. They were definitely still in the USJ, which was nice of Kurogiri. He could have shipped them off to Timbuktu and been done with it. Maybe his tea supply was safe. Frog Girl climbed up the side of the boat, and Izuku gave her a hand up that she probably didn't need, but accepted anyway. Thanks, Frog Girl. He nodded to her. Call me Tsu. She croaked. Okay. He shrugged in acceptance, and then he tapped his chin in thought. Izuku decided he should just think of his brother's goons as real enemies, and turned to Tsu. Well, I think the villains are idiots or uninformed, he declared finally. What makes you say that? She tilted her head. Well, they sent you here, and your quirk is heavily aquatic-based. I'm guessing frog-like mutations. Izuku said, gesturing to her, everything. Didn't need an analysis quirk to figure that one out. Karo, Sue blinked in surprise. You're right. If they knew that I was a frog, they probably would have thrown me into that fire zone over there. She pointed to one of the ominous domes, specifically the one covered in red and orange flames. Ah, yes, frogs are sensitive to temperature. Izuku nodded. Okay, So how do we use that? Not the temperature thing, the obliviousness of our enemies. Well, I'm more mobile in the water, but I can't take all of them at once if they surround me. Carol, Sue admitted, placing one of her elongated fingers on her chin. They both peeked over the edge, and Sue made a croak of anxiety as they were firmly surrounded by yelling villains. Izuku pulled Sue down and away from the edge, making them both crouch on the deck so the villains couldn't see them. Okay, what if I caused a distraction? Izuku suggested, whispering slightly. I could jump in the water and pretend I'm running for it. I'm a pretty fast swimmer, and I can use push to shove them away from me. It's not perfect, but it might allow you to slip in the water unnoticed and take a few of them out. It's dangerous, she croaked quietly, tilting her head. Let me tell you more about my quirk. Izuku nodded in acceptance. I can jump high, stick to walls, and stick my tongue out up to about 20 meters. I can also spit out my stomach and wash it, and secrete toxic mucus that actually just stings a little. Sue took a moment of pause before adding, the last two are practically useless, so you can probably forget about them. Okay, as I said on the bus, my quirk is called Push and Pull. Izuku realized he still had quirk immune active. I can push or pull things towards or away from me telekinetically with my hands. She nodded easily. You'd have to stop swimming to propel the villains away from you, then, right? Karo. That's right, he confirmed. Can we try it? If it doesn't work, then there's no harm in just coming back to the boat and trying a new strategy. But if you have to choose, get yourself out and just leave me behind. It's not like any of the villains could really beat Izuku if he didn't let them, but they could definitely try. If I'm seen, I'll come and get you out right away, Sue said firmly. Izuku sighed, but he didn't push it. All right, now, I'll just jump right in the water and you can climb down the side once their attention is on me. Sue nodded firmly, and Izuku took a deep breath before standing and jumping to stand on the rail. Oh no, we're surrounded, Izuku cried, dramatically putting his hands on his face. I'm so out of here. Izuku jumped, executing a flawless dive, and cut through the water as he landed to stroke his way away from the boat. He glanced behind him to see villains yelling and swimming for him, completely focused on him and ignoring whatever Tsu was doing. But several had mutations that made it so they were going double the speed he was. You win some, you lose some. Izuku tried pushing the water away instead of the villains, and they all went spinning backwards much more effectively. Izuku surfaced with a gasp, taking another breath and continuing to swim. Several more swam at him, and he pushed them back as well with a wave of water. Die already, you stupid kid. Izuku looked down in mild panic as a webbed hand grabbed his leg and was sharply yanked downwards. Izuku shut his eyes, prayed his dad wouldn't kill him, and activated his quirk, Water Touch. With maximum control, Water Touch moved the water as he moved his hands. Izuku swirled the water around the villain's hand, creating little whirlpools around each finger and forcing the villain to release him, and then sent the villain spiraling downwards into the depth with 10 times the force he could have dreamed of creating with push. He then briefly used it to push himself to the surface, vaguely worried about the burning in his lungs. He broke the surface with a heavy gasp, and then coughed before swimming away again a little slower than his previous pace. Midoriya. Izuku turned as sharply as he could in the water, and his eyes landed on the upper half of Tsu's face that peeked out above the water. The villains are unconscious. Thanks for distracting them. Karo, you're amazing. You really did all the work, Tsu. Izuku grinned. All I did was run away. He glanced toward shore, and then looked back at his classmate. Let's head to shore. Maybe we can get back to the entrance, yeah? Karo. She nodded. They swam for the shallows, Tsu politely going his pace instead of just zooming off like the opie little froggy she was. And then they waded through the shallows until they were close enough to make out the shapes of a racer beating the shit out villains in the central plaza. Oh look, there was Tamura. Nice. Chapter 9, USJ Part 2. Let's get a closer look, Izuku said, and he started creeping towards the edge of the water zone without another word. His classmate croaked, but he felt her following him. Good little hero student. Izuku peeked over the ledge with Tsu behind him, and he immediately fought off a sigh. The villain with the hand covering his face was definitely Tamura. Izuku had already known that, but the hair up close was even more unmistakable. Mophead 100%. Stay here. I'm gonna stall the villain until backup can arrive. Izuku whispered, turning to Tsu. If you try to follow me, I'll just push you away. Got it. Stay put. She scrutinized him. I think this is a bad idea, Karo. Tsu croaked. I'm not planning on fighting, just talking and pushing the villains away from Aizawa-sensei. He lied. If Aizawa hurt Tamura, Izuku might have to blow his cover right then and there. I don't like this, she told him blandly. I'm going to get help. Then she bounded off through the water and away the next moment. Well, leaving was fine too. Izuku turned back to the central plaza and saw his brother running directly for Eraserhead. Izuku really wished he could use a hearing quirk, because his brother seemed to be mumbling, but he'd already broken his dad's rule of only using his 2 designated quirks, and he didn't want to risk it again. Eraserhead charged as well, and Izuku held his breath as Eraser's scarf shot out. Tamura grabbed it and yanked, pulling the hero closer, and grabbed the elbow that was thrust into his stomach. Izuku passively watched as the elbow started flaking away and clenched his teeth as Eraserhead punched Tamura in the face. Tamura went down, falling on his ass as Eraser leapt backwards with a crumbling elbow, and Izuku resisted jumping up to help his brother. Izuku trusted Tamura and tried to reassure himself that brother would be fine. He was capable enough to handle one pro. It was satisfying that Eraser had no time to breathe, though, being immediately attacked by more of Tamura's minions. Where the hell did Tamura even find that many low-level villains to bring, anyway? Tamura's beast slammed Eraserhead into the concrete, and yellow goggles cracked as they flew off the hero's face. Eraser's head was bleeding, and his arm was twisted and broken, but otherwise he was fine. Izuku sighed, climbed the ledge, and headed towards the plaza. Time to talk to his brother. Tamura turned and promptly laughed, probably because Izuku was soaking wet, and his curls were dripping water absolutely everywhere. As he approached, Izuku activated Quirk, Muffle. It didn't completely mask whatever they said, but it did turn nearby ears and hearing quirks away, so conversations could remain private. People could theoretically hear them if they were close enough, but Aizawa was a ways away and struggling against the monster that had twisted his arm like putty in his hands. What are you doing here, Mora? Izuku sighed, putting his hands on his hips. This is a field trip. Izuku gestured to the building they were in. I wanted to see you, Tamura said brightly, grinning behind the hand. Eraserhead screamed from behind them, and they both briefly glanced back to see that Eraser had tried to erase the monster's quirk and gotten his other arm smashed in retaliation. Okay, what's with the getup? Izuku moved on and gestured to Tamura. At home, his brother wore gray sweatpants and black hoodies. As he stood before Izuku, he was wearing 2 short leggings and a too loose black shirt, not to mention the various hands decorating him. Dad said I needed a costume. Tamura rolled his eyes. I said my normal hair color would be enough, but he didn't think so. Thus my face being covered, and the extra hands are just for pizzazz. I can't believe you just said that. Izuku face-bombed, making his brother cackle. Anyway, why are you attacking? What's the excuse? Well, I wanted to see if Eraserhead was a proper teacher, and he looked satisfactory to me. Tamura nodded to the hero who was still struggling underneath the purple monster. His arms were messed up, but he was conscious still. But I told my underlings we were killing All Might, so there's that. Really, I'm just here to play with Eraserhead and give Nomu some XP. Oh right, I'm guessing this is from Dr. Izuku grimaced at the creature. You called it Nomu? Oh, yeah, Doctor gave him to me. Tamura grinned. Apparently Dad's been letting him experiment again, and he's been having Dad give these guys multiple quirks. They're keyed to mindlessly obey us. Well, mainly me, but also you. Dad added you as an admin too, even though I'm player 1 and his successor. You think I want a brain-dead monster? Izuku made a face. Yuck, you can keep it. Shigaraki. Hirojiri appeared next to them, and Izuku was immensely relieved he hadn't said Tamura anywhere near where Eraser could possibly hear them. 13 is incapacitated, and a student escaped. Tamura sighed. Well, I guess this level is nearly over. He turned to grin at Izuku. Here, I want to show you something first. I have a bad feeling about this, but what is it? Izuku sighed wearily. Tamura laughed brightly. Nomu, pick my brother up gently, Tamura ordered. In a flash, Izuku was suddenly swamped by purple arms, and he cried out lightly in surprise. Nomu had picked him up, tucked him into his arms, and pinned him to his muscular and very purple chest. See, he's OP as hell. Izuku glanced at the pro who was no longer restrained. Aizawa was on the ground still, conscious with blood running down his face, but he wasn't really moving due to his mangled arms. He wasn't a threat, so Izuku turned back to his brother. Very nice, Mora. Izuku rolled his eyes, squirming futilely in Nomu's grasp. Now, if you're leaving, let me. Tamura, Izuku, and probably everyone in the USJ collectively froze as the doors up by the entrance exploded inwards. Ominous footsteps rang out, and then suddenly All Might appeared from the smoke. It's fine now, All Might declared, making both brothers frown. I am here. There was no bravado, no confidence, only radiating anger. Ah shit, you need to get out of here, Izuku said to his frozen brother. Izuku, I'm using you as a hostage. Damn it, seriously? Say fucking shit if you're actually hurt, okay? Now, deactivate muffle, Tamura ordered. I know you used it to talk to me. Turn it off. Am I that predictable? Izuku muttered, but he turned it off. Tamura then turned to All Might with a crazed grin. Oh, we're getting a continue now, he announced. Come meet your death, trash of society. His goons were mostly standing again, after recovering from whatever Aizawa had done to them, and then they were promptly knocked down again. All Might moved in a blur, but then he was standing still with a groaning Aizawa in his arms. He whispered something to the hero, and then he darted back up the stairs to place Izuku's teacher safely away. Nice of him, really. Don't come any closer, All Might, Tamura yelled with a grin. I have this little green kid as a hostage. He cackled then, probably because of Izuku's completely done with life expression. Oh no, Izuku deadpanned. Whatever shall I do? Save me, All Might. Boy, do you want to die? Tamura turned to Izuku as if he were confused by his sarcasm. Nah, I just hate the thought of being saved by All Might. I mean, yuck. Izuku made a face of disgust, and Tamura laughed. I like this one. Tamura grinned, turning back to All Might. I'll make a deal. I'll go peacefully, leaving all your students unharmed, but I get to keep this one. Never, All Might yelled, clenching his fist. Release young Midoriya. He charged, Carolina. Nomu, Tamura murmured. Smash. Suddenly Izuku and the Nomu were between All Might and Tamura, and Nomu's arms only barely shielded Izuku from the heavy wind attack. Jesus, Izuku yelled dramatically. Watch it, All Might. The hero backed up, metaphorical sweat on his face as he realized how deep the shit he was in was, and glared at Nomu. Release young Midoriya. All Might ordered again, gritting his teeth. No, I don't think so, Tamura said from behind Izuku, voice soft and dangerous. What will you do, All Might? Let us leave with a hostage to keep, or risk killing him trying to fight Nomu. Izuku didn't really see the angle his brother was playing at, but the way he said it made Izuku genuinely sure Tamura had a plan. Both ways, he had an idea, which meant there was a 50-50 chance Izuku was going to get his ass kidnapped. Fantastic. I'll never abandon those I can reach. That's what it means to be a hero. All Might yelled. I won't let you take him, and I will defeat you. A shame, Tamura whispered. Nomu, fight All Might, but keep the little green boy safe, okay? I've decided I like him, but don't let him use his quirk. Keep his hands hidden. Oh, come on, Izuku yelled, wishing he could stomp a foot. Then the breath was hardcore knocked out of him as Nomu charged All Might with whiplash-inducing speed. Izuku was put under the Nomu's arm, sort of tucked away in his purple armpit and pinning him there with an elbow, but the Nomu had both hands free to attack. Obviously, the arm pinning Izuku in place couldn't extend fully because his elbow was the only thing keeping him from dropping Izuku, but he seemed to be managing wonderfully. It also helped that Nomu was immune to All Might's attacks, of course. One punch grazed the Nomu's arm and wind whipped across his face, making Izuku cry out in mildly genuine fear. All Might's power was seriously no joke, and he didn't exactly want a front row seat to see it in action. All Might hesitated at Izuku's shout, and that gave Nomu enough time to sink his claws into All Might's side. The hero stiffened, grabbing the hand and trying to pry it off, but that was when Kurogiri arrived. All Might sank into the ground through a swirling purple portal, stopping waist deep, and he started struggling madly to get the hand out of his side. "This is good, Kurogiri." Tamura laughed lightly. "It's an unexpected opportunity." Izuku was then shifted in Nomu's hold, presumably because he'd started to slip, and he suddenly found himself thrown over Nomu's shoulder like a sack of potatoes, held there by Nomu's hand on his back, pressing Izuku's stomach into the Nomu's shoulder. His hands were pinned under his stomach, so Izuku couldn't do much more than squirm. The Nomu's other hand was still deeply embedded in All Might's side. All Might seemed to realize his predicament and turned to glare at Tamura with teeth gritted in pain. "This is your first offense." All Might checked. "You'd better prepare yourselves." Izuku watched his brother stiffen, clearly unhappy, and frowned. "What a nice little bluff." Izuku muttered, loud enough that Tamura heard and relaxed slightly. "Kurogiri," Tamura said softly, "would you be so kind?" All Might turned to look at the misty villain, hands still pulling uselessly at Nomu's claws. "I do not want blood and guts overflowing within me, but I would be happy to take in someone as great as you." Kurogiri sighed, smugness radiating in his voice. "You're too fast to see with the human eye. Restraining you was Nomu's job, and now that your body is halfway through my portals, closing the gate and tearing you apart will be my job." All Might gasped, staring down at the portal around his waist, and Izuku resisted a smile as he looked upon the panicked face of the number one hero. Unfortunately, Izuku did not get to witness All Might's imminent death, because Bakugo came out of nowhere and slammed into Kurogiri with an explosion to the neck brace. It made Izuku gasp in shock and concern for his sort of babysitter/friend, but he played it off as just surprise. "Die!" Bakugo screamed as he pinned Kurogiri with a feral grin. "Take that!" At the same time, ice crept from the left and encased the Nomu's entire left side, freezing his fingers so All Might could rip the claws from his side. Nomu's right side was untouched, leaving Izuku unfrozen, which made him sigh in disappointment. Damn Todoroki's perfect control. Izuku would have loved to be frozen. Just a bit of frostbite. "All I heard was that you all are here to kill All Might," Todoroki said, breathing out frost, and Izuku could have swooned at the burning anger in his expression. All Might jumped away to land by Todoroki, and Shinso came sprinting forward then too. "Midoriya," he yelled, eyes panicked as he saw Izuku pinned in the Nomu's grasp. "Stop acting so stuck up, foggy nobody." Bakugo grinned ferally, leaning in to loom over Kurogiri. "The symbol of peace cannot be killed by the likes of you," Todoroki said blandly, staring at Tamura. "All Might, the deal still stands," Tamura called, ignoring the students altogether. "Remember, the little green one is at stake." Izuku sighed. "What deal?" Todoroki narrowed his eyes. "Oh, I promise to leave peacefully and not hurt anybody else, so long as I can keep him." Tamura grinned, approaching the Nomu and gesturing to Izuku. "Otherwise, well, All Might will probably kill him accidentally if he tries to fight my Nomu." "Obsessive behavior, really," Izuku muttered. "Oh my god, shut up," Tamura groaned. "Keep annoying me, and I'll take the purple one instead." He pointed at Shinso with a distinct look, reminding Izuku he was supposed to care about his classmates and stuff. "Yeesh, alright, my bad." Izuku sighed. "Keep me then." "Maybe I will." Tamura grinned, making Shinso take a step forward before he was stopped by Todoroki's hand landing on his shoulder. Damn, if only Todoroki touched Izuku like that so he could feel his freezing touch a guy. "If I can't attack Nomu, I'll just attack you," All Might declared. He charged, but Nomu jumped in front of him, directly blocking All Might's path. The hero's punch slammed into Nomu's chest, and Izuku's hair was blown back by the wind again. He cried out and hit his face in Nomu's shoulder as All Might jumped back, gritting his teeth. Shinso was barely being held back by Todoroki, and Bakugo was still pinning Kurogiri. All Might dodged to the side with a punch, and the hero's attack connected with Nomu's shoulder. The blow landed inches from Izuku, and he shrieked again. "Stop!" Shinso yelled. "Stop! You'll hurt him." It's fine, young Shinso. All Might threw a thumbs up behind him. Why? Because I am here. Oh yeah, 'cause I feel safe. Izuku coughed, recovering from the wind shocks. All Might slammed his fist into Noma's face, probably to try something new, but the bird head whipped to the side and his beak sliced across Izuku's shoulder. He cried out in pain, and All Might jumped back with gritted teeth. Fucking shit, Izuku yelled, gasping as blood sluggishly leaked from the wound. Nomu, bring him here. In a flash, Izuku was dumped on the floor at his brother's feet, laying on his uninjured side, and Tamura crouched down to place 2 fingers to the wound. His eyebrow twitched in concern and mixed guilt, but Izuku just shook his head. It's just a scratch. Izuku lied quietly in reassurance. He kept his hands under his back, so he had an excuse for why he wasn't shoving Tamura away. Ah, symbol of peace. Tamura smiled tightly, standing and stepping forward so Izuku was behind him. You just willingly got a hostage injured. Some #1 hero you are. Nomu, retrieve our exit gate. Izuku gasped as he saw the Noma disappear, and then someone went flying backwards. When the dust cleared, Izuku spotted Bakugo safely a few feet from Todoroki and realized the person Nomu had sent flying was All Might. What? Shinso exclaimed, staring. If Bakugo is fine. Then that was. Todoroki was also staring, and Izuku finally could see where All Might had ended up. He was over a dozen feet away. So you protected the child? Tamura asked softly, tilting his head. It looked creepy with the hand covering his face. Don't you know how to hold back? All Might coughed. They're just children. It was to rescue my companion. I had no choice. Tamura answered easily, gesturing to where the Nomu had successfully freed Kirojiri. What about you? I'm not the one who hurt this child. Tamura gestured to Izuku, who dramatically glared. Besides, violence for the sake of others makes it admirable, right, hero? You know, I'm angry. I'm angry at this world that categorizes the same violent acts as heroic or villainous, deciding what's good and what's bad. Tamura turned around to glance at Izuku with a grin. You punched a villain and hurt a hostage, and it was heroic, right? But if I did it? Tamura crouched down beside Izuku, making sure everyone could see him, and he ripped off a pouch from Izuku's belt. He grinned as he set all 5 fingers on it, and then turned to blow the dust off his hand towards the students. Izuku wiggled to unpin his hands as though he was panicking, and then sent Tamura a significant look. His brother shot out a hand and grabbed both of Izuku's wrists with one hand. He pinned Izuku's wrists to the ground with an excited grin. Please don't, Shinso cried out in panic. Tamura raised a challenging eyebrow at Shinso. Young Shinso, don't get involved. All Might ordered, running forward to stand between the students and Tamura. Run away. You would have been in trouble if I hadn't done anything earlier, right? Todoroki asked evenly, raising a defensive hand. That was a different story, young Todoroki. Thanks. All Might replied with a pressed grin. But it's fine. Just watch as a pro gives it everything he's got. You can't. Shinso yelled, glaring at All Might. Midori is still over there. Don't worry. I will save everyone. All Might assured him. Something in Shinsu's eyes changed, and it made Izuku very interested. You promise? Shinso asked nervously. I assure you. All Might froze in place, unmoving, and Shinso blew out a heavy breath. Izuku blinked in genuine shock because Shinso just brainwashed All Might. Okay, villain, you said there was a deal, right? Shinso said, looking at Shigaraki shakily. Oi, don't negotiate with villains. Bakugo yelled, cracking his knuckles. Do you want Midoriya to die? Shinso snapped, pointing at Tamura. That guy disintegrated Midoriya's gear. He looked back at Tamura with determination. Okay, what can I do to save him? Interesting. Tamura said to no one in particular, tilting his head. What would happen, I wonder, if I take him with me? 3 days would be good, and I wouldn't necessarily need to keep him longer. How can I trust you'll do it? Shinso asked, narrowing his eyes. Aren't you going to answer me? It'd be a shame if a heroic student tried to use his quirk on me. Tamura said, turning to grin at his brother. My Nomu reacts badly if the one controlling him goes offline. Okay, Shinso cried, throwing out his hands as Shigaraki dusted another of Izuku's costume pouches with his free hand. I won't. Seriously, how can I trust you? Tamura looked back up at him with a grin. You know what I want. Shinso shook his head with a frown. I want the world to see us. I want the League of Villains to be feared. Why else would I pick you, eh? None of your friends are seriously injured, except for the poor green one here. Only, I didn't do that, did I? Tamura laughed softly. What if I got you on the news? Shinso negotiated, swallowing hard. Headlines. Izuku wiggled his fingers, as if he were trying to free a few of them, and furrowed his brows like he was concentrating. Shinsu's eyes caught the movement and then quickly looked away from it. Without even looking, Tamura's hand shot out and grabbed Izuku by the jaw and yanked him up to a seated position. Izuku gasped but didn't move, his eyebrows raising as his brother squished his freckled cheeks. Don't think I didn't see that, little hero. Tamura released him, slightly pushing him, and Izuku fell back on his elbows to the concrete with a gasp. Can't blame me for trying. Izuku coughed, letting his head fall backwards onto the floor. Tamura still held his wrists in one hand. Back to the purple one. I'd say we're getting closer to what I want. Tamura said, turning back to Shinso. How about I keep him for a little less than 3 days, and promise not to hurt him even the slightest bit that whole time? I'll release him at the end of those days if you get me and my league in the headlines. That's your insurance. He's perfectly safe. Tamura reached down to ruffle Izuku's fluffy hair, and Shinso stiffened, making Tamura laugh. My quirk control is flawless. He's safe as long as you hold up your end of the bargain. Tamura pressed 5 fingers into Izuku's curls and yanked on them, making Izuku gasp slightly. No, you can't have him, Shinso exclaimed, glaring. Think of something else. Tamura opened his mouth to reply, but a bullet went clean through his hand. He released Izuku's hair with a cry, and Izuku's forehead collided with the concrete, making him cry out as well. The jewel on his headpiece shattered. Sorry, everyone. A high-pitched voice rang. Sorry we're late. Izuku raised his aching forehead to look up, but his vision was blurry. He vaguely realized his hands were free from Tamura's grip, but he didn't really care. He assumed the people were heroes, which meant Tamura needed to get his ass in gear. Wait, Tamura was shot. Snipe. Izuku saw the heroes spilling in from above. Ito was racing for them, eyes pinned on Tamura. Izuku barely resisted a snarl as he glanced over and saw his brother clutching his wounded hand to his chest. Tamura looked at him curiously, asking permission, and Izuku nodded minutely. Release Midoriya. Ida yelled as he came to a stop beside the other students and a still frozen All Might. At that moment, Izuku sent his brother a look and jerked his chin at Nomu, and then he reached for Todoroki and pulled. Todoroki stumbled, but froze his feet to the floor, and Izuku flew towards him at high speed. Izuku crashed to the floor and rolled, slamming into the ice at Todoroki's feet with a dizzying gasp. The ice felt amazing on his aching shoulder. Midoriya, Shinso cried, falling to his knees to hover worriedly over him. Todoroki crouched to melt the ice off his feet and started looking Izuku over as well. Hirojiri, let's go, Tamura ordered, ignoring the heroes. A portal appeared around him, blocking a barrage of bullets. I look forward to the headlines. Purple one, Tamura yelled. Nomu, grab the green one. Before Shinso or Todoroki could blink, a giant purple hand wrapped around Izuku's waist and dragged him backwards. Izuku widened his eyes and looked at Shinso and reached for his friend as if he were panicking. Shin. And then he was swallowed by Kurojiri's portals. Chapter 10, Aftermath Part 1. Izuku was in Nomu's arms as the monster stepped onto wood floors in their second base, the bar, and Nomu dropped Izuku so suddenly he yelped in surprise. Izuku stood with a groan, pressing a hand to his shoulder, and immediately hurried over to his brother. Your hand, Izuku exclaimed, hovering in front of his brother. Are you okay? Me? Your shoulder. Tamura diverted, reaching out a hand to assess the damage. Nomu did this. He turned to glare at the monster that was standing mindlessly in the middle of the bar. Hirojiri, wisely, warped it away so Tamura couldn't decay it. All Might punched Nomu's face so hard the beak got me. Izuku lamented. It's fine, it's not that deep. Damn, That could have gone better. Tamura huffed, reaching for Izuku's shoulder. Hello, you're both grounded. They turned at their mother's voice and found both their parents standing behind them. Oh my boys, you're hurt. She came over and gently took Tamura's hand, smiling sadly at the bullet hole in his palm. Hisashi, can you fix it? It won't heal well if we just leave it. I can, he confirmed, stepping forward. I confess, healing quirks aren't ones I sought in excess, but I have one that heals any wound that fits in my palms. Their dad took Tamura's hand in both of his, pressing his palms to both sides of Tamura's hand. It made him wince, but Tamura blinked suddenly, and Izuku gasped as his brother pulled his hand back to see it was perfectly healed. That's amazing, Izuku exclaimed, grabbing his brother's hand in awe. It has its drawbacks, Hisashi lamented. For example, it can only be used once a day. He stepped forward to examine Izuku's shoulder, which was now soaked in blood, and then sighed. Either way, your shoulder injury is too big. We'll have to just wrap it instead. That's okay. Izuku smiled, releasing his brother. I'm not really supposed to be healed while I'm here anyway. Tamura here kidnapped me. Did he now? Inko raised an eyebrow. I wanted to test the heroes. Tamura grinned, pulling off his hand pizzazz accessories one by one and placing them on the bar. All Might tried to fight me even though I had a hostage. That's how Zu got injured. All Might did it. Ah, that buffoon. Their father sighed. And your hand. Tamura opened his mouth, and then he turned to face Izuku with a worried expression. Oh my god, your face. Are you okay? He exclaimed, raising a hand to push Izuku's curls out of the way, only for Tamura's hand to meet something sticky. Izuku winced as Tamura found the abrasion. Izuku knew it wasn't bad, but his head throbbed like hell and was evidently bleeding. I knew it. I'm so sorry. Oh baby, what happened? Inko pulled out a handkerchief and started gently dabbing the blood away. Izuku reached up and removed his circlet, which was missing the gem that had shattered, and threw it to the ground. Tamura was showing off his ability to control his quirk by holding my hair with all 5 fingers, and that's when he was shot. Izuku hissed in pain briefly from his mother's gentle touches on his forehead before continuing. He let go, obviously, but I fell forward and hit my head on the concrete. Do you have a concussion? Hisashi asked. Izuku shook his head. No, it hurts a lot, but I'm not dizzy, and the blurry vision cleared almost immediately. Izuku assured him. My forehead just got scraped up a bit on impact, that's all. The jewel shattering against my face didn't help any. He looked over to smile at his brother, who was fidgeting anxiously. It's okay, it wasn't your fault. Okay, Tamura murmured, frowning. Also, I'm killing Snipe, Izuku declared. Nobody shoots my brother and gets away with it. Tamura cracked a tiny smile. Oh, Tsukachi is heading for the apartment, Hisashi said suddenly. He suspects that the villain Shigaraki is Tamura because of his interest in Izuku, and wants to check for a bullet wound. What is his deal? Izuku exclaimed in exasperation. Now he's accusing random villains too? If I say hi to someone on the street, do you think he'll accuse them too? You did show off your boring face to him at the station. It's your own fault. Tamura grinned. Yeah, but that was before Dad made me become a hero. Like you're doing a good job anyway. Boys, Tsukachi, their father reminded gently. We should get back to the apartment, then. Tamura sighed. I'm guessing we'll have to pretend to be devastated? Ask a lot of questions. Izuku piped up, glancing from his mother to his brother. He can't detect lies or truth in questions. You could use, how could this happen? And aren't you going to save him? They'll expect things like that. Saying you never expected a kidnapping should also work. Hisashi hummed. Especially since Izuku being kidnapped for real is a ridiculous idea. Oh, Hugh, Tamura realized with a blink. His father reached out with a smile and ruffled Tamura's hair, green soaking it, and Tamura shuddered briefly. Thanks. Go change. Izuku grinned, gesturing to Tamura's badly fitting villain clothing. You look ridiculous. Right? Kurogiri, my bedroom. Tamura glanced at the portal user and then wrinkled his nose. Not the apartment. I can't keep my costume there, for obvious reasons. Kurogiri sent Tamura through a portal, and Izuku sighed. How long until Tsukachi arrives? He asked his dad. About 15 minutes. He answered with a smile. We have time. You're sure your head is okay, Izuku? His mother asked seriously. Do you want some ibuprofen? I'll take some ice, actually. Izuku decided. A portal opened in front of him, and he had to quickly catch a freezing cold blue rectangle as an ice pack was ejected. Oh, thanks Kurogyri. He sent the misty man a smile. Okay, fine. Izuku wasn't burning his tea stash anymore, even if he did rudely dump Izuku in the flood zone. Of course, Izuku. Kurogyri nodded to him. As Izuku pressed the ice to his head, Tomura was portaled back and looked comfortably messy in his usual hoodie and sweatpants. Kurogyri, Inko called gently. We're headed to the apartment. Yes, ma'am. Kurogyri nodded politely, creating a portal for them easily. Izuku waved with his free hand as his mother and brother disappeared, and then plopped down on a bar stool. Izuku. He looked up at his father curiously. I'd like to give you a quirk, coloring. It allows the user to change the color of anything they touch as long as they've seen the color before. You're around Tomura enough that it would be beneficial for you to have it in situations where he might need to have green hair, and I'm unavailable. Why haven't you used it before? Izuku asked. It seems more useful than hue. Coloring is harder to control, and it can change the color of anything. Hisashi explained patiently. You might accidentally change all of Tomura green instead of just his hair. Does that make sense? Izuku nodded. That's why. Regardless, you need a color-changing quirk, and this is the next best thing. Can't I have hue? Izuku frowned. I don't want to mess it up. I trust that you'll get the hang of it. Hisashi smiled, and Izuku nodded. All right, I'll do my best. Izuku smiled in consent. Hisashi placed a hand on Izuku's head gently, and Izuku felt the quirk transfer to him. It tasted like bubbles and caramel, sickeningly sweet and sharp, as if too many tastes and feelings were tangled on his tongue. It swirled in his palms, and he felt as if his hands were crusted with old paint. He wiggled his fingers against the sensation. It then soaked into his skin, leaving him gasping with euphoric dizziness. Wicked, Izuku breathed, inhaling and exhaling to let the feeling pass. He couldn't help but feel disappointed by the feeling. It made him ache for Todoroki and Shinsu's quirks even more. Detective Tsukachi arrived. Would you like to watch? Hisashi asked, grinning. I have cameras. Izuku laughed as the slight high faded and nodded. Definitely. Inko answered the door with a frown, Tsukachi standing on the other side. Detective, what can I do for you? She asked, looking him up and down. Midoriya, can I come in? Tsukachi asked seriously. I have some news that you and your son need to hear. Is it about Izuku? She exclaimed, eyes widening. He sighed tiredly in response. Yes, can I come in? Inko opened the door for the detective, stepping aside and leading him into the living room. Tomura, come here. Inko yelled into the house. The detective is here about Izuku. There was silence, but then a door slammed shut and Tomura appeared in the doorway, yawning with a hand over his mouth. What is it? Tomura said, plopping down next to his mother. Tsukachi had narrowed eyes pinned to Tomura, eyeing both of his perfectly intact and flawless hands. Midoriya Izuku was kidnapped by the League of Villains during a field trip today. Tsukachi said bluntly, watching their reactions closely. Now, Inko and Tomura had already chosen their roles, so Tomura stilled completely and stared at the floor in apparent shock. Inko, on the other hand, immediately covered her mouth with a hand. How could this happen? Inko gasped. Nearly everyone says UA is the safest school around. Tsukachi sighed. They attacked with over 4 dozen villains, and there were only 2 teachers present at the time. Tsukachi admitted, scrutinizing them both. Midoriya was taken hostage. All Might and the heroes were unable to recover him before the villains retreated. So you lost my brother? Tomura said, looking up with wide eyes. All Might let him get hurt. Is that what you're saying? I suppose, but All Might could only do so much with a hostage thrown in the mix. Tsukachi frowned. Reports say Midoriya Izuku was very nonchalant about his hostage situation, but showed immense alarm when he was actually taken. Do you know why that is? Izuku likes to think he's invincible, Tomura said, staring at the wall. Nothing phases him until it does. Tomura thought about Izuku's promise to kill Snipe. Specifically, he didn't care about Snipe at all, until he did. "Mom, can I go to my room?" He said it quietly, as if he was partially in shock, and his mother nodded. She brushed his messy green hair away from his face, and he stood to stride out of the room. "He seems to care about his brother a lot," Sukachi said, staring after him, "even though they're so far apart in age." Actually, they're only 4.5 years apart. Tamura is only 20, and Izuku is nearly 16. Inko smiled. They've been close their whole lives. As little kids, they'd run around our home and make such a mess, but they were so happy. Tears shone in her eyes, and she let them spill over a little as she looked back at the detective. "You'll get him back, right?" Inko whispered. "You'll save my baby?" "We'll do everything we can, ma'am." Sukachi sighed. She nodded, wiping her eyes, and he stood to leave with a polite little bow. Inko buried her face in her hands and let her shoulders shake a little as he left, only letting the laughter escape once the door was firmly shut and she had counted to 10. Laughter poured out of her, and Tamura came out with a raised eyebrow as he took in her gasping breaths and snickering laughs. "Well, at least now I can tell Izuku that you laughed when he was kidnapped." Tamura grinned, and his mother laughed even harder. Tamura smiled as his mother continued to laugh, and he knew Izuku was safe with their dad. It was a successful day for the villainous family, really, and the thought only made him smile wider.